The line between computers and consoles blur. Dragon's Lair wows coinop. And Reagan thinks video games are swell. These stories and many, many more on this episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine.
I've been waiting a long time for a chance to say this. Stop the presses.
Requiescat in pace.
Makes him crazy, man.
What is a man?
It's me, Mario.
What a mess.
Get over here!
Please save me.
Welcome back to another episode of the Video Game Newsroom Time Machine, the show where we travel back in time to find out what was making headlines in the home computer and video game industries of yesteryear. Today we're going to be traveling back 40 years to April of 1983. I'm your host, Carl, and I'm joined again by everybody's favorite co-host, Dale. Welcome back to the show, Dale.
Hello.
So, obligatory banter. What have you been up to?
Oh my goodness. Well, not too much in the recent weeks, mourning the death of Twitter and participating in some. Let's see, we've been focused on the Tetris movie. That's been one thing that's been of interest in the last little while. And trying to get back into some research, trying to get back into some writing. It's been a busy time at work this season, so looking forward to the springtime and summer ahead, basically. And what else? Oh yeah, we did a GA preservation chat the other day that was quite good.
Yeah, GA Gaming Alexandria.
Coming together, sharing Gaming Alexandria, my home away from home.
Yeah,
Sure.
I've bemoaned this many times that I don't get to spend as much time in those forums as I wish I could. But yeah,
they're time consuming. So
yes. Yeah, the Tetris movie, I still haven't seen it. From everything I hear, not worth seeing. So probably going to have to catch up on that at some point, someday.
Not so. Can't be. I'm going to go for. I'll let you know after my third viewing what I think of Tetris, the movie, the game.
Why would you do that to yourself 3 times?
The first one was a challenging watch because I watched it with some of the other GA participants. So I do have to go back for. I have to go back for a second clean room viewing, I guess, in order to truly give it a criticism.
So basically, you mean Ethan was screaming too much?
Yeah, there was a lot of shouting. Alex was also present. There was a significant amount of real-time correction, put it that way. And it got such that it deviated from the historic narrative so far that eventually it won. It beat us all in the end, really, because it was so deviant from what the story was, and that just caused us confusion. Anyway, but that's the Tetris movie in a nutshell. I recommend anyone watch it. I'd love to know people's opinions as a standalone movie for sure.
Okay. Well, I'll have to give it a go at some point, but I don't have Apple's products anymore, so that takes me out of that ecosystem.
I'm sure it'll be on. It'll have its broadcast television premiere any day now. Available on DVD.
Yeah, because that's totally a thing they still do, broadcast movies, right?
I'm sure. The broadcast premiere. I'm sure I see it all the time.
Yeah.
Tonight on ABC. The world broadcast television premiere of Tetris, the movie, the game. All right.
Okay, we've got a buttload of stories today, so we should probably get started with it. Remember, everybody, when we're traveling back, we're always using the cover dates of magazines and newspapers, so obviously the news always happened at some point before that. Please don't send me hate mail. Also, all the links to our sources are in the show notes. They're very extensive. You can read up on the stuff yourself because obviously we're not giving you the full text. But before we turn back the time machine, and also remember all the links to our socials, blah, 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 are in the show notes, as well as a link to our Patreon where you can get the video version of our first segment, the 7 Minutes in Heaven, where our intrepid co-host must play a game that was reviewed in a publication dated April of 1983 that they have never played before. So, Dale, we had some interesting choices this month. I mean, obviously, post-Christmas season, but we had Star Trek the arcade game, Sinistar, Enduro on the 2600, Congo Bongo and Super Pac-Man also in the arcades. But you went with something that actually connects nicely with one of our major stories this week.
And thank
this
goodness.
month. Choplifter for the VIC-20. It's our first VIC-20 game. We've never done a VIC-20 game before.
Bargain basement gaming, kids. With Choplifter on the VIC-20.
Hey, you haven't played it yet. You don't know that. That.
I did used to own the VIC-20 though, and I can tell you,
so
it was always a miracle when there was a playable game on a VIC. The VIC-20 was rough around the edges, put it that way.
Hey man, for $199 with a keyboard,
$199 with a keyboard, and you can get a tape drive.
Okay,
right.
So are you ready for your 7 minutes in heaven?
Yes, let's do this.
Excellent. Welcome back from your 7 minutes in heaven. So, Dale, for the uninitiated, how would you describe how would you describe Choplifter on the VIC-20?
Choplifter on the VIC-20 is an experience not to be missed if it was 40 years ago. But today, it's a little confusing and janky and kind of not glitchy, but the sprites certainly flicker. And, I mean, it's good in context. It was playable. It was fun in terms of it had good controls. But I was a little confused, obviously, on some of the mechanics, so I didn't get very far. But I mean, it's a VIC-20 game basically. You're dealing with something that's right about on par with really an Atari VCS. There's not much room there. So in terms of a shoot 'em up, I mean, for a VIC-20 in '83, it was a good shoot 'em up game, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
rescue elements and little people you had to rescue. You had objectives.
You also had the multiple layers of stars in the background moving, which gave the whole thing some depth. When you shot at the tanks, you were also shooting into the screen. There was, the bullets changed size. There was an ungodly amount of flicker. Oh my God, there was flicker.
There was a lot of flicker. But there was an attempt at parallax motion and side-scrolling that was impressive for what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, now you were paying good money back in the day. That was a cartridge with extra memory. So
definitely true.
What was your Choplifter retail price back in the day? $29.95, maybe? Maybe not that much.
No, I mean your standard price for a game could have well been in that range. I mean, I could probably pull up some old magazines.
I feel like $24.95 is not off the mark. Somewhere in the 80 to 90 converted range of today's games.
Yeah.
Choplifter was a AAA VIC-20 title.
Oh, definitely. I mean, this is Broderbund. It's they're already considered one of the top tier developers on the Apple II. And
right.
This is their first, as we will see in a later story, this is one of their first two titles for the VIC-20 and also one of their first two titles on cartridge, which is basically a way for them to compensate for the lack of memory in the VIC-20.
Right.
So if you had to put this on cassette, I don't know if you could get this game in or how, I mean, are you going to run out of memory?
Yes, I would say yes, you would. It would be my hunch. Or that would be the only level. What you saw in the video was the only level in the game. Would have been what you got into the 3.5K that the Vic had for RAM, basically.
You're probably right. And, so the fact that it exists, the fact that it worked as well as it did, and has the complexity that it does, is, as good as it was going to get, and also shows, hey, you can have a computer that plays games that are just as good as your 2600.
That's right.
Okay, so would you recommend this game?
As a novelty, perhaps, but it would be difficult to say. Maybe if I had accomplished the first level, I'd have felt a fulfillment had gone on to the second level and felt like it was playable, but I can't imagine that it has much more of a lifespan to a modern than a normal 2600 game.
That is probably a very, very wise assessment.
Old shoplifter.
Okay, cool. Then
in
that case, let's move on to our next segment where we check in with our good friend Ethan for the Department of Corrections.
Dun, dun, dun.
Hello, this is a prepaid collect call from
the Department of Corrections.
This call is subject to recording and monitoring. To accept charges, press 1. You may start the conversation now.
Welcome back, Ethan. So, before we get started with everything that I got wrong in our March 1983 jump, It
is the Department of Corrections, and here is the comment for Alex, Mr. TCW himself. Alex, you were talking about something. I can't remember what, but you didn't say merchandising. You said merchandise. No. You can't let this go by. Every time you say it, you must say it like this. But yes, this is the open door to the Department of Corrections because we were taking in so many today. Mr. Carl, are you ready to atone? Atone for all the problems that you have with yourself?
Yes. Please, sir, may I have another?
That you shall, for there are several to take. First off, the price of the ET cartridge. I went and looked exactly what it was at the time. It's around $35 to $40 when it was new in November 1982.
Oof. Oh, that's painful. That's painful.
They were steadily going up in the price for their major releases. I think that was part of the way that they were, raking in so much profit. I think Pac-Man was about the same.
Okay. So, yeah, that was going to put you back then. I mean, that's, especially given inflation and everything since then, that's an expensive piece of kit.
Yes.
Well, expensive games.
Initially, I thought that it was they were doing extra memory in there. I had read that somewhere, but as it turns out, I believe it's only 4 or 8K. So they had to do it wasn't 2K or anything, but yeah, it was just expensive because it was a license.
Yeah. And because they probably thought they could get away with it.
And they did on their other major releases, but then everything turns back, and of course, whenever you look at these prices back then, you have to remember that there's a significant difference between $40 now and $40 back then. And the fact that we're only just now paying for $70 means that we've been having it good for a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the sheer quantity of games being sold has helped. But you're right. Games have not,
and they haven't necessarily needed to. But that's a current day thing, and we're in the past, Carl. Next up, we have the Vectrex, and Milton Bradley did not create the Vectrex.
This is true. Yes.
Was by a company called Smith Engineering, who did it for GCE, and then GCE got bought by Milton Bradley.
You're right. If I misspoke there, I misspoke. Very bad of me.
But here's something you continually misspeak, Carl. Lines are not vector
Did
graphics.
I say that again? Oh, Jesus.
Yes, you did. Once more. You referred to some, PC flight game or something, and you said that has vector graphics. No, Carl, stop.
Okay.
Not again. Don't hurt me more.
It's a mental block at this point.
You can technically say they are vectors, but they are not vector graphics, because those are very specific.
Very true, very true.
Then, Coleco, when they made their Atari VCS clone, they did not reverse engineer the chip themselves. They had another company, the company that would later do it, or provide the chip for the backwards compatibility on the 7800, were the ones who actually provided the chip for the what is it called?
Oh,
the expansion module 1?
Expansion module 1 and the, what did they call it? The Genesis?
Yeah, the
Gemini, that's it. Ah, okay. And so Atari actually went to those guys later on and was like,
yeah,
you did a great job on that.
It is a completely ironic turn of fate that I actually... It didn't click with me until I saw this video by a guy named Hero Journalism, who's done a couple cool video game history videos. And good guy.
Cool. Yeah, that is actually...
Then...
Sorry, I'm just wrapping my head around it. Cool.
Other Atari-adjacent news. The Chuck E. Cheese special that you mentioned. That aired on the Disney Channel in 1997.
Yes. And just as a quick update to this, I have interviewed the guy who was in charge of the technical side of the project. Now, I tracked him down. Very interesting, and it wasn't digital puppets as we understand the concept today. It was more the issue of moving, basically breaking parts of the image down into objects and then moving the objects. And they never really figured out how tweening was going to work. It was always, well, somehow the computer will do it at some point.
So, but you're saying moving the objects, there is interpolation in moving something.
Think of it more along the lines of sprites as far as I understood it.
Okay.
Yeah, that still apparently wasn't working. That's why the only thing they had was they could get the black and white line art in, and they could fill it using a fill tool, and the rest of it never actually worked.
Yeah, and this is the advantage of the different type of vector art when the Flash era came around.
Exactly.
Of that you're able to you're able to rotate something without it getting pixelated.
Well, and
because they finally had the resolution to be able to do that.
And this wasn't using any kind of vectors. This was straight up 640 by 480 pixels. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah, it's an interesting interview. It'll be coming out in a while, but the guy actually had a long history. We didn't actually spend that much time on Cadaveroscope after all, but yeah, fun stuff.
But I will say the one other thing in relation to this story is you were trying to come up with how you can talk about the quote-unquote slideshow. What you meant to say was storyboard.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I could not think of that word for the life of me in that moment.
All right, that will wrap up March of 1983. Carl, do you feel sufficiently humbled?
Yeah, it was okay. Light month.
Yeah. It is when Alex is there. He gets to catch all your problems.
I do enjoy having him here. But hey, Dale is doing a plenty good job today, so it's all good. Okay, well then, Ethan, as always, thank you for your service.
Yep, bye-bye.
Cool.
I mean, when I was young, I'm pretty sure that we paid well over $100 for my copy of E.T. at Christmas of 83, but 82. But I mean, markets may have varied around the country, but I'll look for my old Sears receipt and see if I can find somewhere in like the $80, $90 range. I'm feeling like it was.
Now, are we talking U.S. or Canadian?
Yeah, that might have been the case. Maybe that was it. Yeah, 80.
That
Canadian
definitely would have made
83.
a difference back then. In 83, that was a considerable difference in price.
Yeah, growing up as a Canadian, yeah, you can always look at the you could look at the American adverts and you could tack on an additional $5 to $10 minimum on whatever you expected to pay yourself at retail. Yeah. So
yeah. I mean, it's pre-NAFTA and back when the exchange rate wasn't nearly as close.
It's true. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was some huge disparities from time to time, although it kind of came close to par. I suspect, too, there were some deals where some of those carts needed to be manufactured domestically in order to circumvent some of those tariffs and duties that went on. But that's Canadian E.T., and he actually looks more like a moose than the weird alien, so we don't have time for that. Let's...
I thought
we'll just have to agree to disagree with you.
On him and called it a day.
All right. Where's that time machine?
So we've got all of this nonsense out of the way. Now we have bigger, better nonsense to deal with. Namely, we need to turn on the time machine and head back, not first 40 years to 1983, not 50 years to 1973. We need to head back today 80 years to April of 1943. And we don't have a sound effect for this one. So, Dale, what's our first story?
RCA's Engstrom sees long-term benefits of wartime radio research.
Dr. Elmer William Engstrom, head of research at the Radio Corporation of America, aka RCA, has told the New York Times that he sees great benefits for mankind arising from the proliferation of radio technology after the war. While RCA is busy developing new military applications for radio tech, the civilian uses in both homes and industry, as well as the adjacent technology of electronics, could revolutionize communication, scientific understanding, and even energy production.
Insane. Wireless communication.
Wow, I mean, and it's not just, receiving your fireside chats anymore. We're talking big time.
Pictures? You're going to send moving motion pictures through the air?
Yeah,
this will never work. It will never work, Carl.
He's not talking about that yet, but Engstrom is going to be the lead on the project that first showed the feasibility of TV broadcasts using electronic TVs in 1939. So he is on the cutting edge of this stuff.
I feel that once we get through this war, this television thing might really catch on.
Who knows? I mean, someday it may even influence and destroy our democracy.
Nah, well.
Well, it won't be the
if it were only that fragile.
Cable television. So,
the institutions will save us, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, anyway, it is dangerous here in 1943, so we should probably...
yeah, let's get
I'm going to go get back in the time machine. I'm concerned about some of the things going on here.
Let's jump forward 30 years to April of 1973.
The marriage of traditional pinball machines and computer technology.
1973.
An unsavory type of place.
There's a sound effect nowadays for this, so.
Okay. Sorry.
Welcome to 1973. Dale, what's our first story?
The big story. Pong clones are on the rise.
While Pong itself has barely received any mentions in the mainstream press, the number of clones are beginning to make waves. Thanks to our warden of the Department of Corrections, Ethan, we know that an arcade in Vancouver, Canada was advertising Spaceball, a Pong clone made by Nutting Associates, and Florida-based Allied Leisure Industries Incorporated saw their sales more than double from $807,000 in the first 5 months of 1972 to $1.96 million in the first 5 months of 1973, in large part due to their Pong clone paddle battle.
The Pong clones. I thought this was maybe, I thought at first maybe this was like one of those Clone Wars thing, but it turns out no, it's Pong clones. It's, I don't remember. I've always thought back and tried to remember if I ever saw an original Pong machine versus table tennis. And I have a feeling in my most distant memories that truly the Pong ones were hard to find.
Oh, definitely. I mean, they had so many production problems with them. They had so many issues with just, distribution because they were a relatively new company. And it was so easy to clone them, relatively speaking, that, the clones outnumbered the originals by a factor of God only knows how much, really.
3 to 1, 4 to 1, maybe, I think.
Oh, at least.
Oh, no, we have at least about, but I think those
higher
numbers, because, we're only like 10,000. There wasn't even 10,000 original Pong machines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is why. I mean, it's just so outrageous at this point that, they're just like, screw it. They're going to make whatever they're going to make, and that's it.
I'd like leisure ate your lunch, Atari.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, it created the market for what was going to come next. It really established that idea of, okay, it's here to stay. But, Atari is kind of missing a beat here. By not getting them out. But it's also interesting that the trade publications, there's not no word on Pong, but there's relatively little being said about Pong. And, I mean, we've had a few mentions over the last couple of months, but it's not having that revolutionary feel just yet. But we can see that people are ordering it. So there's clearly a delay in the way that it's being covered by the trade publications and the mainstream press. Now, this will change by the year's end. This is going to be a completely different world. But at this point, it's just like a little thing here, a little thing there, slipping through.
We're still pre-fad.
Oh, definitely. Now, it's interesting. One of the side things about Allied Leisures in these articles is they do note that they think Paddle Battle will open up many new venues for coin-operated machines in the near future. So where coin-operated games would have been limited to, your bars and arcades and stuff, they're thinking that this thing is sophisticated enough that it will show up in other venues like restaurants and stuff that would have never considered coin-operated machines before. And this is a very insightful and interesting view because it will come true. I mean, this is where we're going to get the supermarket video games.
Yes. That's where I played Sinistar. All right. Washington State legalizes pinball.
Governor Daniel J. Evans has signed into law a bill that allows bingo and raffles by charitable or nonprofit organizations and punch boards, pull tabs, and pinball machines that do not provide payoffs.
What kind of pull tab that doesn't provide a payoff? What would the fun of a punch board or a pull tab be? I can see pinball, but a punch board with no prizes? Here, you get the little piece of paper. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. Well, I mean, and this is the interesting thing. I threw this in just because it was interesting to see that there's still these. I mean, we just had the pinball movie. And this idea that these old laws prohibiting pinball are still on the books and they're slowly disappearing. They're not all gone yet. Just as videos is really coming into its own, pinball is finally coming out of the gutter, if you will.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is actually, I'm sure that there are other states, but we think of the prohibition to be in municipalities or on the East Coast or particularly in Chicago. So I didn't even realize that Washington State had a prohibition on it in the first place. So
yeah,
I mean, that's
but
a big.
I think pretty much every state in the union did
really
at one point.
Right.
It's just an issue of how long did it stay there?
Yeah. Well, 73 is actually that's a reasonably early to start pulling them, I think. You know what I mean? I think that we wait. I think it's even later that you see it in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, at least based on my memories of what we've read in that pinball movie when, the pinball movie was certainly set after 73, for instance. So those are the progressives from Washington State, I guess.
Hey, man, West Coast for the win, my home state.
That's right. IBM introduces memory-enhanced typewriter.
IBM's MagCart 2 typewriter has a built-in memory feature allowing for the storage of words written prior to them being typed out so that corrections can be made. Up to 2.5 pages of text can be stored on the $11,800 machine, which can be leased for as low as $295 a month.
At these prices, I can't afford not to write.
Exactly. Man. Now, the interesting thing is I could not find any information detailing whether or not this has a computer monitor or how it's displaying the text.
I have a weird, vague memory of these things in that it was like a similar to an LED dot matrix format, and so you could see maybe 10, 15 characters of typing at a time, and you could maybe scroll up and down them. Yeah. I mean, I remember those kind of devices in the 90s. Right. I used one of those once, and then you had in the 90s then the ones with like an amber screen where it was a proper word processor. Right, right. That was my replacement for, having a proper computer at the time. And you can even play Tetris on it. That was cool. But... the price on this is just so astronomical when you think of just wait a couple more years. Wait a couple more years once you get, your Commodore PET for a fraction of this price in less than 5 years or 6 years. And it'll just be insane. The race to an 80-column screen, basically. Yeah, exactly. And you could see with these prices, and it's true. Like if you've ever worked on a typewriter if you've ever worked on a typewriter without correctability and had to use things like liquid paper or slashing it with ink and a pen and then continue. Yeah, anyway. Exactly. Good for you, IBM. You're going to change the world, IBM. I feel confident in this. The MagCart 2 will turn it around. It will persist and conquer the market, yes. All right. The first cell phone call ever made. Yeah, Motorola engineer Martin Cooper made the first ever cell phone call on April 3rd, 1973, on the streets of New York. Shortly thereafter, his cell phone was stolen. I guess he could have called someone on the public telephone network system, but... Yeah. But, this is the beginning of Candy Crush on your phone. No. Man. It's the beginning of the end right here. This is... yeah. It's, soon work will follow you around at all times. You will never be able to not have a dystopian future. Dystopian futures. It was amazing how they marketed it as a privilege thing. Like a cell phone even in the late 1970s. That was a car phone. Yeah, I'm assuming this thing. I've seen pictures of this. I believe it's not a car phone that I've seen. No. This guy's got This is a proper brick phone. I mean, yeah, the really those giant brick phones that we see in 80s movies. That's basically what this device already is at this point. Yeah. But practically speaking, the introduction of it 5-10 years later starts in the automobile because you almost can't carry the real. By the time they unroll real technology to do this stuff, it's so large that it's almost like it's got to go in a car. One, for portability, and two, for power. I think it's the power issue. I don't know how long the battery would have lasted on these early 12 devices. Seconds. Yeah, exactly. Well, it ran off of those old 9 volts. It had 7 9 volts in it, and it weighed 14 pounds. There you go. All right. And that was just the battery. Soylent Green ad misses opportunity. A preview ad for the upcoming Charlton Heston dystopian sci-fi epic, Soylent Green, features an image of actress Lee Taylor-Young with the text, "In the future, this is furniture," when they really should have highlighted the true furniture of the future of the movie, a computer space cabinet. Lost. They didn't even know what they were shooting at the time. It seems. That's probably true. But yeah, I ran across this ad in the New York Times,
And it's one of those, and nowadays I don't even know if they do ads for movies in newspapers any longer, but back in the day, that was like the thing to look for on the weekend edition or something. All the ads for the new movies coming out, and it's just this big little or sort of chunk of screen or page. It's just white. It says Soylent Green at the top. It's got the picture of the girl. She's on her knees looking up, and it says, "This is furniture in the year 2022, the year of Soylent Green."
Right.
And obviously, I mean, yeah, that's a line in the movie where she's, comes with the apartment and all this. But the fact that there's also a computer space cabinet in the apartment, which is also part of the furniture, that's what they should have put on there. That would have sold you futurism. But
I never understood how that game made it in that movie. I'm also surprised that this movie had enough of a budget to buy a New York Times ad.
Oh, Soylent Green was a major motion picture.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking Charlton Heston was
That's
huge
true.
at the time.
That's true.
No. That was a major studio production.
Right. Not an indie film.
No. Soylent Green, I mean, massive sets. You had all the people, the extras. I'm trying to. Who was the. What studio brought it out? I think it's. Is it a Warner Brothers film?
I was going to say, that sounds like a Warner thing, doesn't it?
It wouldn't surprise me if it was a Warner Brothers movie,
No.
but I'm probably completely off on that. I'm trying to look at the movie poster right now through things, and it looks like that might be a Warner Brothers symbol in the bottom corner, but I am... No, MGM.
MGM.
Mayor.
There you go. All right.
Yeah, but no, I mean, it was a major film at the time. And I mean, Edward G. Robinson came back for it. He's great in the movie. So yeah, absolute hardcore classic. Anybody who hasn't seen Soylent Green, definitely go and watch Soylent Green.
I obviously have to go back now. So. There's my feature, Soylent Green and Tetris. That is a double feature picture show. Right there.
Definitely nothing fits together better than those two. Yeah, I guess. Okay, both of them depicted the future just as accurately as they could. No. Okay, so, and Soylent Green plays in the year 2022. So, we just went through the year of Soylent Green. And
I feel like they were right, frankly. They weren't far off. It was a different hell than you envisioned. That's all.
That's true. That is true. It was a different hell. It was a hell where you didn't even have properly done phone books anymore. That all the information networks had collapsed. Okay, yeah, that is kind of 2022. Okay, let's move on.
Right. Let's get back in the time machine before the inflation catches up to us.
Exactly. So let's go ahead another 10 years to April of 1983.
Business has dropped in half over the past year. 1983.
Certain types of games.
Business is like sex.
Craig's at its peak.
Welcome to April of 1983. So, Dale, what's our first story?
Dragon's Lair, Oz, the AOE.
The amusement operator show in Chicago played host to the first playable version of Dragon's Lair by Cinematronics. The Laserdisc-based game only had 4 of the eventual 42 scenes running, but operators hungry for something new to put in their arcades were eager to give it a go and await the summer launch of the game. Other big hits included Sega's Congo Bongo, Nintendo's Mario Brothers, and Taito's Zookeeper.
I could have played any of those. 4 scenes of 42.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all you needed.
That's more than most people who put in their 50 cents.
More than I ever saw in the first $100 I spent on it. And after that, it was... well, we all know. We've said that we've addressed... Dragon's Lair has been addressed on this show before We have personally discussed Dragon's Lair. We feel the same way about Dragon's Lair in that when you first saw it in an arcade back in the day, the top of your head came off.
Exactly.
It threatened a sort of promise that you thought unimaginable. You felt like you actually walked through a time warp. You were finding it difficult to express what you were witnessing because I think your imagination grabbed at the possibilities, ran wild with it, and then only after playing the game a bunch did you realize its inevitable shortcomings.
Yeah.
And so I reflect on that because I could only imagine what the poor bastard operators and distributors were like when they walked into the AOE and went, oh my God, what is this?
Exactly.
And they're like, this is our proto of this. This is going to come. I mean, I can see why it had such advanced sales.
Well, and this is something also over the last 6 to 12 months in the arcade space. When, number one, we've been talking about this on the show, coinop is in a serious tailspin. Coinop it doesn't know where it's going. And one of the big trends of the last year had been the cartoony character game. So the idea of spaceships are out. Donkey Kong really set the world on fire. Everything had to have a cutesy, cartoony pixel character now.
Yeah.
And this must have felt like, okay, so we've moved from a short little pixelated Popeye to it's just fucking Popeye. You know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Look at this. This is real.
But because, I mean, Congo Bongo, Mario Brothers, Zookeeper, they're all cute cartoon character-based games that more or less look like cartoons. I mean, Congo Bongo is probably the one that looks the most like a cartoon of those three. Right. And now here you just have the straight-up cartoon. The fact that it's not going to have the long-term playability, but it looks so amazing. I mean, it's Don Bluth's animation. It's going to become the thing that you're going to covet for years and years and years to come.
You operators have no idea what's going to happen. It's going to be amazing. Wait until the DVD breaks. The laser, the
laser disc, yeah. Well, and interestingly enough, Coleco has already purchased the home rights to Dragon's Lair, apparently for use in an upcoming home disc system with first refusal rights to future Cinematronic titles. And plans are for 4 new titles each year to build up a library of game discs at operators' disposal.
I remember I was very sad I couldn't get a ColecoVision because it was only a matter of time before I would have home Dragon's Lair in my home.
Well, I mean,
40 years later, I'm still striving for Dragon's Lair in my home, to be honest. But here we are.
Well, theoretically, I mean, the Daphne emulator will give it to you nowadays.
Find me the damn wads. They're harder to get now.
Oh, they're out.
I'll say this: at least Dragon's Lair still has somebody actively litigating its intellectual property in the year of our Lord 2023. Put it that way. So, if nothing else, it has survived that as an icon. And there's a movie coming out next year, isn't it, or soon? Something. Ryan Reynolds.
There's been a movie in the works for a long time.
20. Don
Bluth tried to do a Patreon a few years ago to help finance a pitch that went nowhere.
If they weren't pitching a movie in 1983, it was dereliction of duty. I'm sure that there was some Hollywood. Bluth himself was probably trying to pitch the thing as a movie.
Well, in 1983, they got the TV show up and running.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And they had already started work on Dragon's Lair 2 Time Warp, which doesn't come out then for another 10 years.
Right.
We covered that on a 30-year jump last year.
The advantages of going back and forth.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's Space Ace, and there was a third franchise which was supposed to be basically a take on Space Ace where it was a sailor and he becomes super muscular, or he's a tiny little guy and he's fighting a sea creature. There's some promo artwork for it, but it never went beyond that. So this idea that they wanted to do, 4 discs a year, it looking at how many that they had 4 games in production kind of makes sense.
It was remarkable they got done what they did.
Exactly.
And it turns out in the end, the bottom line is hand-drawn, hand-painted cell animation is expensive.
Very,
very, very expensive.
And we're not talking Hanna-Barbera,
No.
Basically one step above animatic.
No.
We're talking
this is quality stuff. I know. Yes. And I think that's also, too, if it had been a Hanna-Barbera kind of production, if it had been shoddy cartoon work, it was the fact that it was that Disney Bluth level of tight animation. Again, I'll never forget the first time I saw it.
No, me neither.
Speaking of first times,
into my mind.
Tron is a hit.
Well, the game, not the movie. Well, the movie died at the box office. The arcade game has taken in $60 million.
The poor movie.
Yeah, I mean, the movie, the film cost $17 million to make, and it only made $33 million at the box office.
Yes.
Which, when you take in the cost of the cost of marketing and the cost of producing the film reels, which back then was a huge, huge chunk of this, yeah, that movie probably didn't even break even.
I think I'd argue that it had merchandising tie-ins by then that may have helped it over the edge. Certainly not what they wanted, because Disney foresaw this. Oh, this thing was making 9 figures. I think was the intention. It was certainly, there was no movie that I can remember that had its marketing hype and tie-ins similarly. I was thinking about it the other day. It might be one of the first movies that I can ever remember where it had the effect of, once you saw the trailer, you really wanted to see it. Very slick trailer, but maybe not the same level of payoff when you got into... Because, I mean, I went to see it in the theater way back in the day. I haven't really seen it since, and the one thing I can remember is, oh my God, that was a mess. What the hell did I just watch? You know what I mean? And I was used to the video game, so there was the tie-in of, the video game has, there's the light cycles and the discs, and there's all the components that were integral between movie and video game. But having watched that movie, it was like, what? What did I just experience? Time Bandits made more sense than what I just watched.
Dude, now you're just being
to go back to an 80s flick is what I'm saying. So, yeah. Anyway, good for them and their $33 million, but I can see why. And the arcade game, we can criticize that, too. It pulled in $60 million.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing, that I saw Tron in the theater as well. Now, granted, I'm a couple years younger, so when I saw it, I was just blown away by the graphics. Now, I remember renting it on VHS a couple years later, probably late 84. And that's when I realized the plot made no goddamn sense. Okay.
Watching this on the small TV, what is going on here?
I'm 8 years old, and I'm going, wait, what? Yeah. And why? And how does this? No, this. Wait, which one is Tron again? They all look like blue blurbs.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Simultron wants to take you where no man has gone before.
Simutron. I think it's
Simutron, excuse me.
Yeah.
Simutron.
I'm not sure. I'm actually interviewing the co-founder of this next week. Okay. But yeah, so Simutron has announced their Tournament Centers, a game center built around custom game units using bespoke controls, 4 screens, and licensed laserdisc effect shots from Star Trek The Motion Picture. The cockpit games will cost $3 for 15 minutes and be able to be switched out for different games by just changing laserdiscs and running new software on the Z80-based systems.
Already the revolutionary laserdisc is bringing us entertainment.
Oh, yeah.
Unthinkable. Did this thing ever release?
Yeah, no. They actually had the first center at least up and running. And this thing worked. Now, interestingly, and again, like I said, next week I'm interviewing the co-founder of it, so there's still some holes in it. But according to the news articles at the time, they couldn't use any shots from the movie that had any of the actors who spoke in them. So they could only use effect shots and shots with extras. And that didn't give them a tremendous amount of material to work with. But the cockpits for this absolutely look amazing. There's links to the stuff in the show notes. Where you're sitting there and you're actually looking at multiple screens. So some of the screens are showing you, your computer readouts, strategy maps and stuff. And then there's one screen that gives you moments from the Laserdisc based off of, the outcomes of encounters and the like. And the idea was to have multiple different games using footage from different movies and stuff that you could then switch out and have at the same center. Now, this is interesting because it's happening at the same time as the Sega Star Trek arcade game is being promoted. So these guys have the rights to use Star Trek footage, and the Sega game, and we talked about this previously with Ethan, the Sega game is loosely licensed off of Wrath of Khan.
Right.
So that's probably why they're being able to pull this off. And they're actually promoting that with Nichelle Nichols and George Takei making actual appearances at arcades to promote the new game. And in a related note, there's a company called Advanced Video. Brand new company in the field has announced a deal with the NFL to create an arcade game using actual footage from a San Diego Chargers and LA Raiders game. The software would be created by Perceptronics, who would also be involved with Simutron's game. The game would ultimately get launched by Bally. So this is an arcade game called NFL Football.
Yikes. I'll have to look for details on that. That would be interesting to see.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, it's you just put in plays and then it will randomly decide which play wins.
I guess so.
Yeah, it's.
I don't know how you'd play that out on using extent video footage. That would be the fascinating. How you would manage to work that into different things occurring when you only have a certain amount of real footage with which to draw from.
Yeah, I mean, they gave a number in the Play Meter article of how many different combinations there would be. But, I mean, if you're using very short clips, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Forging a scoreboard and stuff like that.
It's still not going to be as bad as Micro League Wrestling on the Commodore 64. Have you ever played that?
No. Oh. But I'm assuming also this would have been this is we're still talking Laserdisc footage here, obviously.
Oh, this is Laserdisc footage. That Micro League Wrestling was the same exact concept, but with a WWF license.
Oh, no.
And digitized still images on a Commodore 64.
Ooh, okay.
It's rough. So you basically put in your move, the other guy puts in their move, the computer then randomly tells you which move won, and then you see some weird orange blurbs moving around that are supposed to represent the digitized images. It's painfully bad.
Right.
But
gamers will flip for Saker 1.
While some games try to simulate the motion of a spaceship, Saker 1 moves the player. This $70,000 unit uses an air cushion to allow players to flip up and down and all around in a ping-pong ball-like pod that mimics the action on screen as they avoid enemies and shoot. A test unit has been sent to Florida's Space Center, and the company says they have $30 million worth of orders.
I mean, that's why so many of these exist to this day.
Oh yeah, definitely. These you can barely everywhere.
You can barely go to the mall anymore and not see a Saker 1 machine there begging for your attention. And
yeah,
$70 grand in 83.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing's a pricey sports car, and it's running on hydraulics.
Air cushion.
Okay. Well, you still have to have some kind of hydraulic.
Oh, I don't know how it's
still going to have motors. You're still going to have to move. Yeah, you might be using air, but you're still going to have to move a human being around in a chair. I'm just saying, if you think the laser disc breaks down, you might want to consider what this one does.
Yeah, there's some pictures of it online. I mean, the screen that you have inside the game is so small. And people were reporting that, they're getting into it and they're ignoring the game entirely just to see if they can flip themselves over or whatever.
Yes. Oh, I see. Oh, so it's got some real good action on it. Is there any video of this thing that exists?
No, I couldn't find any video. I found some pictures. Like I said, there's a link in the show notes. But it's somebody invented a mechanism. And the idea that you would use this tech in an arcade as opposed to an amusement park is just insane. But, that's one of these moments. I mean, we're getting the same thing in the 30-year jumps right now where the Japanese arcades are going bigger and bigger and bigger with their equipment to differentiate themselves from the home market. Here, I don't get the feeling that it's to differentiate the games. It's more an issue of people hearing that there's so much money in the arcade business that you can now maybe sell these extremely expensive pieces of equipment.
Yeah. Like if we can just nail that deal with the Disney company and manufacture 100 of these bad boys, then we can make it worth it.
Exactly.
All right. Bally sticks to dedicated cabs.
Yeah. Here's the counterpunch. While Universal is still promoting Mr. Do as a conversion kit, and Data East announces the DX1, a conversion kit version of their Deco cassette system, Bally Midway is declaring their dedication to the lifeblood of the industry, their words. The dedicated upright, presenting a new lineup of titles: Wacko, Cosmic Cruiser, Mappy, Journey, and Professor Pac-Man. They are setting themselves apart from the rest of the market, claiming that the horror story of Western European coinop that has seen their market destroyed due to pirated boards, and they claim is now recovering due to overwhelming demand for Atari's pole position, proves that board sales alone do not a market make, and the move to cheaper conversion kits will sink the U.S. coin-op biz.
They're absolutely right about that, and I'm glad they chose that. Whoa, wait, hold on. Oh, no. No, wait. Don't do it. That's interesting. It's interesting that pole position nudges in at sort of just the right time to help make this a bad move. That pole position represented that demand where it was a great game, particularly in the sit-down cab. It was one of the very first sit-down cabs that the immersive get in, it's like a car, and that was fascinating. So that probably was the one example you could point to in that day where you could say, well, your conversion kits, but look, this is the future. Along with these other space cabinets that cost $70,000, but this one is something. Well, I mean, a pole position sit down cab would have been pricey, but not in the $70,000 range. It would have been something an operator might have said, "Oh, you know what? I will sink an extra $1,000 into this cab because that's sexy, and that's definitely going to draw people in." They were fun units. I remember playing them. They were very immersive. You got down inside the car, and anyway, but obviously the decision to stick your nose up at what Universal and Data East were doing was probably not the right business move for Bally.
No. I mean, I understand their motivation. They've invested huge amounts in these, cabinet manufacturing facilities. They're trying to make as much money as they can per game. But yeah.
I mean, how bad was board piracy?
In Western Europe, it was. In Europe, it was terrible.
Yeah, true.
In Europe, it had gone so far that you literally could not, it almost became impossible to sell legitimate equipment. We reported last year that at one of the big shows in London, there was one company that literally just had these giant posters, there were pictures of them, explaining that there is no copyright on software in England. Anybody telling you that you have to buy a legitimate copy of Asteroids or whatever other game is lying to you. And they were right. What has happened, though, in the last 4 or 5 months in Europe at this point is that a bunch of decisions have come down from the different courts, plus what would become the EU, the European community, has just passed a new regulation that each country now has to adopt, dictating what new rules for copyright, including software copyright recognition.
Right. Yes.
So this idea of, the horror story of Western Europe is in part, yes, piracy, but it was also partially because they hadn't had the copyright law changes that North America had seen.
Right.
So,
and it's interesting that they really didn't have the ability, it seems, to stop piracy or cloning of those boards. There obviously was no facile option of a quote-unquote lockout chip to be installed on these things.
Well, I mean, the lockout chip isn't going to do a whole heck of a lot of good because software pirates are always going to figure out a way around it.
Yeah, true. I suppose you could engineer the hell out of it, and then someone's just going to depending on what's in the code.
Well, it's like this. Once you move the code into RAM, all bets are off.
Yeah, fair.
And just ask Ocean Software with their great dongle for RoboCop 3, where you had to put this dongle on there, and the game actually hit all the BBS boards before it even came out in stores. So there was pirated versions of it before it hit the stores, even though they had spent a ton of money on these stupid dongles.
The joystick dongle was truly the hardest thing to get past.
Of course. But like I said, the moment a program has to go into RAM, all bets are off.
True.
Then it's just a question of, okay, how do I get it out of RAM and onto a new disk?
Or onto a new chip, basically. And then you're good to go.
Or onto a new chip, yeah.
Right. Well, conversion kits are popular enough, and it turns out the next story is the IRS may be coming for conversion kits.
The rise of the conversion kits for coin-operated games, which prolong the life of the machine by allowing the operator to replace a no longer popular game with a newer title, may cause operators some serious tax headaches. The question revolves around whether or not the switching out of a board, marquees, etc., which happens with a conversion kit, constitutes a repair of the existing machine to keep the video game machine, quote, in an efficient working condition, end quote, or is it in fact an upgrade to the machine that changes it so substantially that it becomes a new item? A repair would be tax deductible, and the 5-year depreciation usually applied to coin-operated games would make more sense under a repair philosophy, but the IRS has yet to weigh in on the issue.
So let me get this straight. The manufacturers are trying to argue that it's actually just reparation because that makes it cheaper tax-wise.
Well, it's less the manufacturers and more the operators.
The operators, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So the operators...
But clearly it's not a repair. Well, it's truly an upgrade that makes a new product.
Well, here's the argument that they're making. And the argument does have some... On its face, the first reaction is bullshit.
Right.
On closer contemplation, they do have a very valid argument here. So if you see the major expense of an arcade cabinet, and this goes back to, Bally sells you the arcade cabinet.
Yep.
The major expense, if you look at it as the wooden box and the television set.
Yeah.
Then the changing out of the board is a relatively minor thing. Right. In addition to this, you have the following problem, that you have 5 years to depreciate it. Now, if we were talking about, let's say, a pre-video game coin-operated machine, fine. If you were talking about a skee ball machine, fine. If you're talking about Galaga, you've got 12 months of real
5 years. Yeah.
Before this thing needs to be junked. But you have to depreciate it over 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So now the question is, either the 5-year depreciation is just unjust and unrealistic given the nature of the business, or what you're doing by changing out the board, by changing the game that's inside this very expensive piece of cabinetry, is then the equivalent of just putting a new film reel on your projector in the movie theater.
Right.
You know, think about the Dragon's Lair concept. You put in a new disc, you change out the ROMs, and now you've got a brand new game. You haven't done any major changes to it. And so their argument is this should just be seen as a repair. These are repair parts to keep this cabinet earning money for the 5 years of its normal life, as opposed to, I've completely changed it. Really, I have a new product, so we need to start the depreciation all over again.
All right, well, that's a reasonable argument. Obviously hinging on the idea that it borrows this 5-year depreciation period from previous products, and now that we're into video games, the idea of, look at that Space Invaders cabinet where it's sitting in 1984. Exactly. At the back of the arcade, all alone, and it hasn't seen a quarter in about 4 months. There may not even be any reason that it's plugged in.
And this is what, a lot of operators writing into the trade magazines like Replay and Playmeter have been writing about this for a long time now. The ever dwindling period of profitability on machines. So each machine is having a shorter and shorter window of earning.
Right. Oh, yeah. By April 83, everything is destroyed because the shelf life of a video game is literally like a month.
Exactly. And
maybe 2.
And there's articles in both of the major magazines this month, and we already talked about it last couple months, auctions of arcade games are just becoming this major, major event. Right. But at the same time, there's already auctions where they're like, yeah, we've got a bunch of machines. We can't even, nobody's willing to bid on them.
For used cabs, that is.
Yeah, previously.
Right, because we've gutted this part of the industry has been gutted like for 14, 16, 18 months now, where those operators that jumped in during the pack craziness mayhem of it all have been largely wiped out. Or a good number of them, the Johnny-come-latelys that showed up with 90 days payment plans to buy the new cabinet, have already lost their money, and they're in and out as quickly as they came into the industry.
Exactly.
I know. My local arcade has now shut down, basically, for reasons that I can't figure out, and I just want to bring them money. Universities struggle with video games on campus.
The consequences of cuts in federal funds going to states, and thus universities, that we talked about in our June 1982 jump is continuing to have a growing effect on the presence of games in university student unions and arcades. Many universities now have upwards of 100 games distributed around their campus, and the revenue is helping them keep many costs covered, but many fear that students are being distracted by the machines.
Come on. It's just arcade. You think it's bad now, wait till Doom hits.
Yeah, definitely.
Come on, that derails entire undergraduate programs.
Yeah.
Come on, Mr. Do is causing you to not get your science degree? Come on, maybe. It was the New York Times, though.
It is the New York Times talking about this. But yeah, this idea... This is the Reagan era cuts. So when he destroyed the programs for redistribution of funding going to the federal government back to the states, this is where American university costs upward spiral get started.
Right. Yes.
And it's kind of weird to look at it through the lens of this, but the universities are so desperate for any income to cover these shortfalls that, it's like, okay, we'll put 100 machines on campus. Let's see what happens.
That's right. And then, of course, the moral, because video games should always come with moral panic.
Of course. Anything teenagers like is obviously bad because teenagers are just despicable creatures that, will hopefully someday not completely ruin our Social Security.
Right. We're leaning on these are young adults too. These are no longer just children that we can litigate or that we can legislate their behavior. You're now dealing with university students, 21 years of age, who, if they want to play some asteroids, then damn it, we should let them play some asteroids. So there is a lot of moral panic. But in this, there is a voice speaking out on behalf of video games, an unlikely voice. President Ronald Reagan believes that games do improve hand-eye coordination.
In a speech to youth in Orlando, Florida. He's just becoming a Florida man. President Reagan has said that he believes that games do increase hand-eye coordination and sees a benefit of this coming in the form of more dexterous jet pilots. Well, if that isn't an expert opinion you can rely on now, where's my daily dose of vitamin-providing ketchup?
Oh, that 40-year-old joke will never die.
No, it will not.
Kids, for those of you who don't know, the Reagan administration one time tried to stay with a straight face. That ketchup was a vegetable.
Okay, wait. I'm going to stop you right there because they did not actually suggest that. They suggested that relish could be a vegetable.
Really? I misremember. Have I been Bernsteined into thinking the ketchup thing?
No, yeah. The ketchup thing became the punchline because it was like, well, if relish can become a vegetable, then why not ketchup?
Oh my God! Okay,
yeah.
So I could just be misremembering this whole thing based on like a Johnny Carson joke.
Exactly,
as the rest of North America.
That's what became the larger scope of it. Right. And it was part of budget cuts, for supporting,
schools,
food programs and stuff.
Yeah.
And
have you considered this as a vegetable alternative? And it's like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't put it beyond Reagan, but
it was more or less akin to suggesting that cardboard could provide roughage for your diet, for instance. Have you considered eating the cereal box if you've run out of cereal?
Yeah.
It's not as caloric. Now, we don't have time to address this in the history, but it would be funny because this seems like a Reagan thing where he might have said it as a one-off where, he had seen a video game. He's familiar with the importance of coordination amongst jet pilots, spews this out during a rando speech in Orlando and causes an absolute chaotic furor through the Republican Party because now suddenly the beloved leader is somehow giving validity to video games. Because I'll tell you, there wasn't much else. Like the moral panic was always there, and the only sort of justification, real world justification that you could possibly use, and it was used heartily when it came to video games, was, well, it improves hand-eye coordination. And it's like, that's true. But for what exactly, other than more video game? You know what I mean? So.
Well, and this is the thing that even the editorial in Replay magazine this month is great because they basically admit that, the whole hand-eye coordination thing, a lot of us were wondering if that's, really a thing. Basically, it's like, we all know it's bullshit. But hey, Reagan said it. And it's this big, huge deal suddenly that Reagan acknowledges that we exist and that, this could be good.
That's right.
And obviously it's coming right on the heels of his massive new budget proposal, which would increase military spending quite dramatically. And so this idea of jet pilots, coming off of out of the arcades is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's absurd, but to be honest, there was also I remember the same rumor that floated around a year or so before involving Missile Command, as though productive play on Missile Command could possibly be of useful service to the military in some way, although there were rumors, of course, that the DoD was secretly scoping arcades for some of the best Missile Command players, because I'm guessing that our SALT anti-nuclear missiles were fired by someone holding a trackball. Or I couldn't quite wrap my head around how they made the connection, but there was that. It was grasping at straws for a justification for usefulness of video games within themselves amongst the moral panic. So it is funny. I'd love to, like I said, we'll never have time to go back and look, but it would be really curious to know where that quip from Reagan came from, because it sounds like the kind of thing he may have just pulled off the top of his head.
I included there's an entire wiki on it, and I included the link to it.
Okay,
there we go.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did the deep dive because I was like, before I quote this again, I'm going to ask and check it out. And
it totally strikes me that Reagan was just like the jet pilots,
exactly,
because they use a joystick too, just like you kids. And it was like, meanwhile, I don't know.
There's a link to the entire speech. He goes off on a bunch of different weird topics, but it's clear.
You got a couple of aides off to the side on the stage being like, okay, he's been on 7 minutes. Get him the hell off there.
Exactly.
We got to go now. All right. Atari goes after Bushnell.
When Nolan Bushnell left Atari, he signed a non-compete, which would bar him from entering the video game space again until October of 1983. But as we have reported here, he announced Sentai, his new arcade game development company, late in 1982, and has now also purchased Vidya, a video game R&D company made up of former Atari employees. Warner believes this violates both the letter and spirit of the contract and are planning on going after him.
Oh, he'll be fine, I'm sure. Nolan. When you want that money bad enough and they come with $1 million and they ask you to sign the non-compete clause, you really don't think it through at that point,
Yeah, he's really pushing his luck here. It's like, you could have just waited a few more months. By then, the entire arcade industry would have collapsed, and it all would have been okay.
Maybe he was already on. He's like, we don't have 4 more months. We need to go now. When was the compete set to expire?
October of 83.
October 83. Okay. Oh, I see. Right. You already just explained. So we're really, you're just 6 months away.
Exactly. And Chuck E. His version of Chuck E. Cheese doesn't really have that much longer to live anyway. So the whole point of Sentai was basically to make games for Chuck E. Cheese. Laserdisc games, for the most part. So this was all, it's not going to go well.
All right.
Oh, well.
I don't know how to pronounce this. Ottawa?
I think it's Ottawa. I think so.
Ottawa? I don't know if you know this. Ottawa has been declared the video capital of the world.
Walter Day, proprietor of Twin Galaxies Arcade, has gotten the governor of Iowa to declare Ottawa, Iowa, the video capital of the world, in no small part due to Twin Galaxies' holding of high score records.
In no small part. I don't even know where to go with this. This is like one of the saddest stories in the long story arc of video games. Like if we're here on this blessed day in April in Ottawa, and there's younger innocent Walter, and he's running an arcade and comes up with a really brilliant kind of marketing idea, promotional idea for this, and just fast forward 4 decades and it's nothing but like sorrow, conspiracy, deceit, lies. It runs the full story arc. What else can you say about the Twin Galaxies? And I don't even know the whole story. I just know that at this point it stinks in terms of like what it's become over the last 20 years, as opposed to say its first 20 years.
Well, I mean, the problem with, I guess, and I haven't followed the latest developments there, but
no,
I mean, the problem is Twin Galaxies' idea of the score sheet, the scores, really only works for a certain generation of games or a certain type of game, and that's just not the major type of game anymore. So at the time that they're starting to do this, the idea of getting the highest score on these arcade games is the goal of most of the games. But nowadays, I mean, a high score on, what do I know, Candy Crush or Angry Birds or stuff, you don't measure it that way. You measure it by, how many achievements did you get? By which level, or did you finish the story plot? Well, other than some text adventure games, there are no story plots in games.
Right.
So
it's all about score.
Yeah. So Twin Galaxies, my understanding for the last 20 plus years, Twin Galaxies has mainly been about the classic games, collecting these high scores for classic games, and the weird community of people who are still trying to get the high scores on those classic games.
That's a valid point. Yeah, because let's face it, it's 2023. Respect to you if you're still trying to cap off the biggest Donkey Kong score ever, but you are niche now.
Extremely niche. And I mean, and that was one of the better lines in the, King of Kong movie. Call it a movie. Documentary is maybe overstating it. But there was a line about, how everybody in this close-knit community of hardcore people trying to beat these games, they sort of feel like a family, and I think it's even Walter Day, who pats the protagonist of the movie on the back when he fails at one of his attempts to beat the high score. He's like, hey, you're still part of this family now. Everybody in this community knows each other. And that's okay, but it's, it's kind of a relic of the past. It's like the station that was the top 40 station in the 60s in your town that is still playing music from the 60s today. They just kind of stopped at a certain point and didn't keep evolving.
Yeah, like me. I got old. Move over, Game & Watch. Here comes Game & Radio.
Watchmaker K. Hattori & Company has shown off a series of new handheld LCD games at CES. The most interesting of them, Emergency, will feature an AM radio built into the game.
Seems like it should be the other way around.
It should be.
Transistor AM radios were pretty common in '83, I must say.
Yeah. But
those pretty easily.
But this is one of these interesting little bits of, how do we stand out when, there are LCD games. There's very little that you're going to be able to do that's new and innovative. And just the idea of, these guys have clocks, we've got a radio. It just was so ridiculous, I needed to throw it in. And it was the only thing I had for handhelds this month, so we can just go straight into the handheld section now.
Sorry, yes. Oh, of consoles, Atari, you've heard of them, they launch in Japan.
Atari has announced that it would start selling consoles in Japan starting in May, at a price of roughly $104 for the system, and with games selling for $18 to $29 each. The Atari 2800, a souped-up version of the 2600 originally designed for Sears, will be, not successful.
What? A highly valued American product not accepted by the Japanese public? I'm shocked. Shocked, I tell you.
Oh, it has less to do with that and the fact that it's a 2600 in 1983.
Yes, 1983.
Now, granted, the VCS had been sold previously in Japan, but not directly by Atari.
Right. Yes.
But, and never really had a big push. And this is coming, the Famicom's going to launch in July.
Uh-oh.
So this is just a few months before the Famicom, and of course the month after that, the Master System, not the Master System. Sorry, the what was it? The SG-1000, Sega's first.
I feel certain that a well-established, up-and-coming business like Atari, who's under the carefully managed auspices of Warner Brothers Corporation, will no doubt be successful in this new international venture in the future.
Yeah.
Now let me take a big sip of coffee and read the next headline. Oh no! Warner losses mount!
Wonderful setup. Warner Communications posted an $18.9 million loss for the first quarter. Almost all of that came from Atari, which saw its revenue for the quarter drop from $420.8 million in 1982 to just $329.1 million in 1983, and profit of $106 million in the first quarter of 1982 become a loss of $45.6 million in 1983. Atari's losses wiped out gains in both the movie and music divisions of Warner. Warner chair Steve Ross had written a letter to investors in February warning that a decline in profitability was to be expected, but had not said that a loss was expected, which may be a sign that inside of Warner they still don't know just how bad things are.
Or you cooked the hell out of the books in the last quarter of 82 in order to avoid this situation. And now the pigeons have all come home to roost at the same time.
That is also definitely a possibility. Yeah, this is just going to be a bloodbath.
It's going to be a bloodbath. We did a whole episode on this bloodbath. I highly recommend tuning in to.
Yes, our crash episodes. Our crash episodes. The Atari one, and then everybody else. So yeah, we're still in the crash. It's still happening, and this is going to be bad.
And everybody else, how are the others doing?
Well, Coleco has also reported earnings, and their revenue more than tripled from $54.7 million to $180.2 million, with earnings of $16.2 million for the quarter.
Huh. Look at that, Atari. You're being outdone by a leather company.
Well, I mean, Coleco, interestingly enough, and we talked about this last month, but you're still seeing the comments in the trade publications, especially the toy publications when they're talking about this, that, a lot of retailers have just decided, we're still overstocked with Atari stuff. The only product they're buying this coming year, or they plan to buy, is Coleco. So the ColecoVision seems to be, the future of console gaming. Everything else, everything else, including the Intellivision, is just basically dead to them. And
good.
Well, it's not quite console, but it is related. Commodore has also released its quarterly numbers, and they saw a massive increase in revenue. In the first quarter of 1982, they had revenue of $82 million, which jumped to $189 million in 1983. Profit also rose from $11 million to $25 million.
No, because that's when you were buying your VIC-20 to play your Choplifter.
That's when you were buying your VIC-20, but also the Commodore 64 is already out at this point. Commodore 64 was already on shelves for Christmas of 82.
Yeah, but I'm not rich.
Well, I mean...
Not that rich. I have to wait a year to have the prices get slashed in order to afford... You think I could afford a $199 VIC-20? I had to wait for it to go down to like $1.29 before I could get that. All right. Milton Bradley takes a hit on Vectrex. Milton Bradley has reported that they expect to have a loss for the first quarter, arising from a combination of startup costs for the Vectrex as well as requests for late delivery of the console. This has had significant negative impact on corporate profits. That's their words, the company said. This was on top of non-video products taking large sales hits both domestically and in foreign markets. Vectrex, we barely knew ye. What else was Milton Bradley producing in 83?
Milton Bradley in 83 is producing board games. And they've been hit hard by video games.
Uh-huh.
And now I kind of had to look up what it meant, what the request for later delivery. And the best I can figure out is it's a bunch of retailers saying, do not deliver it yet. We don't have room on the shelves. We have this other crap to get rid of. We still want it, but we don't want it now.
Right, I see. Christmas didn't clear the shelves as much as we had thought.
Exactly.
There turns out there's still crap sitting here from March and February. In fact, there's been crap sitting here from October. And,
exactly. This is exactly what we talked about in the specials. It's going to take years for all of that excess inventory to leave. And the Vectrex is suffering now because the retailers who signed that they wanted it are not going to be accepting it because they got to get rid of the other shit first.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Milton Bradley's like, yeah, but you see, we manufactured it, though.
And the retailers are going to be like, that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem.
That sounds like a you, I see. That sounds like a your warehouse problem. Oh, yeah. Speaking of the through-line theme for this episode, Mattel refiles for debt offering.
Mattel had originally tried to offer $100 million in debentures through Goldman Sachs, but due to volatility in the video game market, has now had to restate its financial position and is trying to issue the debt again.
It's probably going to go well.
Yeah.
Poor Mattel. We'll be short on this one because I'm certain that something's going to happen to Mattel very soon. They've got their dirty little hands in this thing as well. Where are we at with their computer? Is
the Aquarius is being previewed in a bunch of magazines this month. Right. We talked about it being shown at CES a month or two ago. And, the reviews are basically, this could be good.
Okay, a little too early. It's not Christmas yet. Yeah. We'll get there. I'm sure the Aquarius is going to be a smash in Christmas of 83.
Well, a lot of people are giving the Aquarius the benefit of the doubt due to Mattel's marketing muscle and also the fact that it's going to have this penetration
It's Mattel.
In the toy stores.
They're a great brand.
Yeah. But, we all know how that one's going to turn out.
It's going to be a blazing success.
Well, luckily they're going to have Masters of the Universe. That's already out.
Yeah.
And
that's true.
Already becoming the hottest toy property. And the Masters of the Universe, the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe television show is going to hit this year.
It's amazing how much we owe to Skeletor and the Cabbage Patch Kids to save some of the companies.
Oh, definitely. Coleco also would not have made it.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Philips announces chess add-on for the G7000. Finally.
Yes. The Philips G7000, known in North America as the Magnavox Odyssey 2, is getting a chess-playing add-on, the C7010. Say that 3 times fast. This add-on attaches itself to the back of the console and has a wired game card to interface with the main system, and will play chess at 6 different skill levels, the highest of which can think 6 moves ahead, albeit taking up to 1 hour per move.
Nice.
It's still not as bad as the VCS chess card, which could go even longer, but still.
Yes. Oh, the VCS chess card could. I think its ultimate setting was you decide when it's done.
Well,
and then there was one up to that where it could literally run for 2 or 3 hours. Your only indication, a flashing cursor on the screen that the game had not in fact crashed on you. I remember playing some of those chess games like that, where it was like you would make the move, you would walk away, and you would come back later and see what the computer had. A little bit like kind of like an email chess, if you will, but with your TV screen in your home. Well, speaking of the Odyssey 2, third-party software reaches the Odyssey 2.
iMagic has ported their mega hit Demon Attack to Philips' Odyssey 2, making it the first third-party game on the system.
Perfect. It was a good game.
Well, and this is actually, it's kind of interesting because the third-party software is a great indicator of just where you are in the market. How much market penetration you have is always is going to bring in the third parties.
Right.
And so...
Meanwhile, it's April 83 and Philips Magnavox is just getting onto the third party.
Yeah, exactly.
System. It
shows you just how far behind they are. And, yeah. Oh, and by the way, the C7010 chess add-on is never going to be released in North America. It's going to remain a European exclusive.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
All right, fine. I'll just order it import. All right. Intellivision becomes a transformer.
Or at least a system changer. Mattel has shown off the System Changer, that's the official name, an Atari 2600 clone add-on for the Intellivision that allows the system to play 2600 games. The system works out of the box with the new Intellivision 2, but original Intellivisions will require a hardware modification done by a service center. Yeah.
Not believing it.
I mean, everybody...
Not taking mine in.
Everybody is still obsessed with our machine has to play 2600 games. And the 2600 was so primitive that at this point, you just throw the chips in there and it's basically a whole one and you don't really need the underlying console that much. But
True.
They're doing this. And of course, Intellivision 2, fine, but nobody's bought an Intellivision 2 yet. It's just coming out, and having this add-on that won't work with all the existing ones without getting your system fixed is just insanely stupid.
It does seem weird to make the decision to say we can't do this through any kind of plug-in. This has to be hardware mod. That's an enormous commitment.
Yeah.
Amongst your... As an 11-year-old, you're not taking my console. That's going away for 3 or 4 weeks, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
How can I live without I can't live without my Intellivision that long. Come on.
Yep.
Wicco introduces the boss.
Not really a huge bit of news, and I'm not sure if it's Wicco or Wyco, but...
Yeah, I just went for it.
But Wyco, maker of quality controllers, has introduced a, quote, budget 9-pin single-button joystick, the Boss, a micro switch controller with a very comfortable grip. My first 2 joysticks were Boss sticks. So, thought I'd mention this. That's not the Boss.
That's not the Boss?
That's not the Boss.
I'm displaying on the video, which you can't see. I'm displaying. It is a Wyco. It's a command control.
That's a command control.
The Boss had the grip and the
exactly
the grip, right?
It had the formed stick, and it had the downside to the Boss was that the stick was not fixed, so you could actually twist it left and right, even though it didn't make any joystick control. So it could, in theory, you could very easily get confused as to which direction the joystick was pointing.
Right.
This was the downside to the Boss. But the micro switches were great, especially if you had to waggle the joystick back and forth a lot, like in a game like Summer Games.
Right.
And unfortunately, also only had the one button on the top. Second button on the base would have been nice, but yeah. The Boss joysticks were going to be around for quite a bit, and they got diffusion all over the world. I mean, you see them in Europe, pop up, and every place else.
Right. Unitoys, K-Tel, Answer Software, and Avalon Hill all enter the 2600 fray.
In a lesson on how not to read the room, 4 new 2600 game publishers have announced their entry into the market. While Unitoys will be introducing their own computer add-on for Atari's 2600, which will use cassette tapes for games and never actually launch, Answer Software is going to make traditional carts, 3 in total, while KTEL, already known for budget greatest hits records, will be launching games with weird T-shaped grips on the top. 2 games will appear, and Avalon Hill, board game maker extraordinaire and already publisher of computer software, plans to enter the 2600 market with a series of titles developed in-house. 5 titles will end up being released.
Well, remarkable they got there. 5 Avalon Hill titles came out?
Yeah.
Or 5 in total? Really?
Yeah,
okay.
5
actually...
Avalon Hill titles for the 2600 did come out.
Oh, wow. I'll have to look those up. I don't know what they are. I'm shocked they got that far, to be honest. I don't remember Unitor. I don't remember a KTEL 2600 release. I've never heard of Answer Software.
Well, the KTEL ones are weird. They literally, it's this T-shaped handle coming out. It almost looks like, the old cartoon plungers for dynamite.
Okay, yeah, no, that's ringing a weird bell.
Yeah, it's just weird that these guys are coming in this late in the game. It's like...
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Crazy.
Yes, and speaking of late to the game, Quaker Oats says goodbye to video games.
Quaker Oats has decided to get out of the video game cartridge business just a year after entering the market, as we reported in our April 1982 jump. According to William D. Smithberg, president and CEO of the company, quote, "We did not foresee the rapid oversaturation in the market, and we have decided that, without making major investments, continuing the business was not viable." End quote.
Well, what can we say? They owned, Quaker Oats at this point owns which toy company? They own Milton Bradley, do they not?
I think they had Fisher-Price at some point, but I don't think they have them anymore at this point.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to rehash the usual tired joke of why are the Quaker Oats people into video games, etc., etc. That just distracts us from the real problem of Chase the Chuck Wagon. And although, hey, good for them for April. They're honestly one of the first to jump, if you think about it. Like, you still have some of these other makers that are, like, still chasing off the cliff like lemmings, the 2600 Phenom, and at least the conglomerate. Because, Quaker at this point is also a massive conglomerate. It is not just the Oats Company with a little dude with a hat. It's...
Oh, of course.
Presumably somebody took a look at that, saw it stunk a month and a half ago, and went, bail. Bail immediately.
Yeah. Well, and
get out now.
And that's a good point that you're making. Most of these people, most of the big companies that got in, the Milton Bradleys and stuff, they're going to stick to it. Quaker Oats is like, you know what? We figured it out. We're leaving. And that quote is so wonderfully on the nose that it's like, we could throw a whole bunch of money into this and maybe try to pull a profit, or just be like, it's an oversaturated market. Screw it. We're done.
Cut your losses.
Exactly.
Right. Move over, porn. Hotels have a new on-demand amenity.
Not
that. Move over, porn. Hotels have a new on-demand amenity.
In-room video games is a new service being picked up by hotel chains such as Radisson, Roadway, Days End, and Best Western, as well as some Hilton and Sheraton hotels, which will provide, for a fee, a ColecoVision console on a nightly basis of $5 to $10 and game carts for a small additional fee. The company claims to have already delivered over 800 units in March alone.
I feel like the porn business was still making more money, but this is funny. I don't think these really catch fire.
No, they don't.
Possibly because the games themselves and the systems themselves will soon fall off of a cliff. It's really not until the Nintendo era that I recognize this as being something that becomes a mainstay of hotels.
Well, I think one of the big problems here is that the equipment itself is still too bulky. If you look at a ColecoVision unit and compare it with, let's say, a Super Nintendo, it's a very different ballgame.
And fragile.
Put
that out into how long are you expecting these to withstand public play?
Exactly. And they don't have the infrastructure to centrally distribute the software yet.
Enough about this console nonsense.
Battle between console makers and home computer makers heats up.
The New York Times reports that a major shift has happened in the home computer and video game markets, with companies in each now clearly targeting the same consumers. All three of the major console makers, Atari, Mattel, and Coleco, have announced add-ons to add computer functionality to their consoles, while home computers from TI and Commodore have been touting their ability to play games. The battle lines have blurred even more, with Commodore announcing that consumers can get a $100 rebate on their purchase of a Commodore 64, which now retails for just $400, by sending in any used game console or home computer to Commodore. With the computer market growing from 500,000 units sold in 1981 to over 2 million in 1982, obviously not all to homes, but still, Mattel, Atari, and Co. are shifting their publicity and product lines to focus on their home computing products, such as the Aquarius and Atari 8-bits, or the computer aspects of their machines like the Odyssey 2, or their computer add-ons. This is in large part to the inroads of low-cost machines like Commodore's VIC-20, the ad campaign for which we have talked about extensively on the show. Kit Spencer, Commodore VP of Marketing, is even quoted in this month's Playthings magazine as saying, quote, "We want people to feel guilty if they buy a video game instead of a home computer."
Guilty!
Yes!
Guilty!
Your children will fail!
That's all I'm saying is that you just hate children by buying them video game systems when you could just buy this keyboard with it as well.
Exactly.
It was the zeitgeist of the time. It was
one of the reasons my parents bought a Commodore 64. The kids got to learn how to use a computer. It's going to be an important skill in the future.
That's good. Mine bought a Commodore 64 because it was that, or they would have had to have killed me to stop asking. Basically, but yeah, this was the beginning of the end. This is the beginning of the great computer war. I mean, $400 for a 64, by the way, is still $1,200 modern dollars. You don't have backup on it. You don't have a disk drive with that. You have the computer. You need to plug it into your television. You don't have a monitor. So it's not we're not at dirt cheap prices yet, but we're at accessible prices for the computers for the masses, not the classes, as it were. We'll get there soon enough.
The VIC-20 is going for under $200 at this point.
Yeah, and once you saw a 64 and you had a VIC-20, which I can personally attest to, you felt like, okay, I have to move on here.
I totally understand that, but when you think about it, the Commodore 64 at this point has only been on the market for maybe 6 months, really, in large quantities.
Right.
And it's already gone down from $599 to $400.
Oh yeah.
You throw in your VIC-20, now it's down to $300.
Yes.
This is, granted, you're going to have to buy the disk drive, which is going to cost you at least $300 or $400 at this point.
Oh, don't get me wrong. And and your competitor's not really offering anything to take the place of that secondary peripheral mark. You're not getting savings because you bought a TI. You're still on the hook to purchase a cassette recorder or the disk drive or the monitor or the totally.
Yeah. Totally. And the TI is much older tech, and let's be honest, is never going to play games that are as cool as the C64 games.
No, it's not going to sound as good.
No, hell no. I mean, there's not going to be much that sounds as good as a C64 for a very long time on the market.
That's true.
But that's just me. I mean, come on, that SID chip, that beautiful, beautiful OG SID chip. And yes, okay, the C64C sounds okay, but it's not the same.
Audience still with us is wallowing in C64 homerism at the moment from two former Commodore kids. All right,
Hey,
next topic.
I'm sorry if you had a lesser machine. I'm so sorry, Specky users.
Listen, I'm sorry Mom and Dad bought you an Apple, okay? Dad thought he was doing VisiCalc, but all right.
Yeah.
Short sellers smell blood in the gaming and computer business waters.
While the home computer hype train is running at full speed, Wall Street short sellers are betting against the hardware manufacturers. Short sell contracts on Commodore stock rose from March to April from just under 500,000 to 538,000. Coleco saw shorts rise from 1.3 million to 1.5 million, and Texas Instruments saw their jumps from 474,000 to 710,000. Warner and Williams both saw their shorts drop.
What can you say? It's a testament to the efficient market hypothesis, basically. They knew. They had a decent sense. Although what's interesting here is that the Warner and Williams shorts drop at this point. Something long-term video game newsroom time machine aficionados will know. In that Warner and Williams had already been shorted by this point. The markets had already soured on them.
Yeah, we talked about this back, I believe it was October and maybe even November we mentioned it as well. We've talked about the short selling positions quite a bit leading up to the crash. So Warner stock had already been shorted so heavily that now that it's dropped, that explains why the short positions are gone. So at this point, people are like, well, can it really be falling any further? A lot of the shorts have already cashed in. But, the Texas Instruments one is the hardcore because TI is such a bigger company than that.
Yeah, that's what struck me. I didn't realize that they had that occurred to them in April of this year because, they're really about to go off the cliff.
Well, they've got, and we talked about this a couple months, or last month or 2 months ago already, they had a major recall of the power supplies for the Texas Instruments TI-99, which was going to cost them basically their profit margin for the year.
Right.
On the machines. And the fact that they're stuck in this price war, and now they've also made, well, we're going to see they're taking on even more draconian measures to try to keep their market share, and the idea of profitability at this point just isn't there. So anybody who actually knows TI and how they're structured knows that they don't stand a chance against Jack Tramiel. He is going to eat their lunch because he's going to cut and cut and cut
until it hurts more. All right, so we're moving on now to, do we move on now to computers?
Computers. It's all computers from here on out.
Computer game. Did you know computer game makers discover cartridges? Probably in a landfill. Now wait, I'm sorry, I'm spoilers.
It's not yet,
right.
But soon, yes. Soon. Broderbund has announced that they will be releasing their first two cartridge-based titles, Choplifter and Serpentine, for the Atari 8-bit line. This marks their first move away from discs and cassettes. Kathy Carlson, Broderbund marketing director, said these first two titles are the first of more to come as Broderbund wants to be a complete computer game software supplier.
And someday we'll reflect back on the overhead of, we already do, the overhead of cartridges, what cartridges meant to some of those computer game makers that stuck their toe in these waters, and when they took the toe out, it was gone.
Exactly. Well, I mean, when I interviewed Ken Williams of Sierra, that was one of the major topics we talked about. I mean, the cartridge market almost killed Sierra.
Yeah.
And, it's one of those things where you can't go from cassettes or discs where the production costs are virtually zero to suddenly have cartridges.
Yeah.
It's every executive I have spoken to so far from this era that was computer software has run into exactly the same problem. It bites them.
Yeah, there's no room for error on the game development and selection. You're into a 6-figure payout up front in order to develop cartridges, and each mistake is just too costly.
Exactly. And the worst part is, these are games that are going to be so easily pirated because the data amounts that they're able to put on the cartridges of this era are so small.
Yeah, 4 and 8K ROM sets that are soon going to just be going to be disc-based games.
Yeah, I mean, when I got my C64, my parents had a friend who also had a C64, ended up getting a couple of discs with copied games, and I still remember the one disc, virtually every game on there were 10 games on this disc, virtually every one of them was originally a cartridge game.
Cartridge-based game for the system.
Yeah. And it was 48 blocks. 48 blocks every time.
48 blocks. Yeah. And maybe if there was one, if there was a big one, it was extra. It was 64 blocks or something. That was a more expensive cartridge. Hey, speaking of Texas Instruments, TI locks out third parties. Good call, TI.
Yeah, go for it. The rise of cartridge-based software on home computers and ever-dwindling profit margins on hardware have led Texas Instruments to announce that they will be using their graphic read-only memory, or GROM chips, to prevent third parties from releasing cartridge software for the TI-99/4A. TI is offering to publish third-party software themselves in exchange for a royalty. The GROM requirement will be added to new TI-99/4A boards designated QI machines due to their board labeling, but invisible to consumers starting in August. Yeah. So
we can tell nowadays.
You open it up and and it literally says QI on the board.
Oh, okay.
I found a website that breaks this down, and there's a link to it in the show notes.
Nice.
Yeah. So basically they're doing essentially a lockout chip.
Yeah.
On the board. I mean,
that's brilliant, Texas. So instead of re-engineering the thing and cutting it down for costs and trying to make it a more efficient machine that can possibly compete with Commodore, the decision instead is, let's put some security on the thing, make it even more money. Make sure that we have to have one of these GROM chips inside every cartridge that we're using, and try and lock everybody out of this. I mean,
well, they're going to make money off the software.
That's right.
Because computer users are always going to pay for the software that they're using.
That's right.
Especially computer users on the low end of the market. That's how this works, right?
Yes.
Oh, Jesus.
Well, I mean, TI had been on that path since. I mean, don't forget the 99/4 begins. It actually starts in like 1976. But it honestly spends a couple of years in development hell. We see the first one come out in 79. They kind of had that locked in. They had already bought into that philosophy, years before. They kind of went down with the ship on that as well. Despite that, I think by this point too, you can plainly look at the market and see that what Apple's decision was through Steve Wozniak was probably getting better dividends because they really had a lot of third-party support on an Apple II at that point, way more than what you would have found for what was coming up for the TI. I mean, I assume they thought it was a more robust market and that there would be those third parties coming out of the woodwork to work with such a vested name as Texas Instruments. But anyway, we'll have to see how this works out going forward, I guess.
Well, I mean, considering that it's going to be in August is when the first machines are coming out, and the 99/4A is not that much longer for this world, the number of boards, of computers with these boards, is not going to be huge.
True. Well, come on. I'm sure that we give it a chance, people will still be using TI 99/4As today. Sierra acquires Sunnyside Soft and prepares to publish Ultima 2.
Sierra has acquired the product line of edutainment startup Sunnyside Soft and will publish its games Bappa Bet, Dragon's Keep, and Troll's Tale, establishing the long-time relationship with Sunnyside's lead game developer Al Lowe, while also announcing that they will be publishing the 2-disc adventure game Ultima 2 for the Apple II, with Atari and IBM PC ports to follow shortly.
Oh, so exciting. Unplayable, but exciting still. It is remarkable that we reflect on this, but Ultima 2 was... I mean, I guess it was... I was never exposed to it in real time, so I can't say. Going back and trying to play it, it's a challenge, but I guess that you probably ran into Ultima 2 even before you even saw Calibeth, for instance. There were probably lots of players that were in that market. Well, I hope that works out for Sierra. They're a good up-and-comer in this marketplace.
Well, I mean, yeah, the infamous clash of personalities between Garriott and Williams is going to lead to Ultima 2 being the only Ultima that they publish.
Yes, that's right.
But it's also probably the first... I mean, it's going to definitely reach a lot more people than Ultima 1 did. Number one, just because of the real-time ports. Number two, Sierra's got a lot more muscle behind them than the previous publisher. And the idea of the cloth map, I don't believe Ultima 1 had a cloth map, but Ultima 2 does.
Oh, does it? Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. And this was one of the big conflicts where, Garriott insisted. Williams hated the idea because obviously it raised the cost of the whole thing.
Right.
But it starts to establish a very different market presence.
Yep. I mean, Richard was right on this one. I still have my Ultima 4 cloth map.
Yeah.
He wasn't wrong.
I mean, it's the feelies in the box, especially at this moment in time, are so important to establishing, that you're getting something for your money. And it's counter-programming to the piracy. It really is. You wanted that box. You wanted those extras.
Yeah, good luck playing without the manual. Sure you... there was a spell book with the Ultima 4 that came with it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. With the runes on the cover and everything. Yeah.
Yes. All right. First Star eyes movie licenses.
While movie studios like Fox are busy publishing console adaptations of their movies, First Star Software sees an opportunity in licensing movies to make games. They have already acquired the rights to 2 upcoming movies, Arcade and Future Gold.
Blockbuster successes, those movies. We still, to this day, they're still streaming on Netflix, I believe.
Yes. Neither one of them...
There was a movie called Arcade?
No.
Oh, never.
Neither one of these gets made. Well, we've talked about First Star before. It's founded, blanking on the gent's name, but it's founded by this guy. He wins the first Star Award that Atari was handing out for people making games for the Atari 8-bits. And he starts the company with this financing of these guys who had done film financing or production in Hollywood. So that's where this connection is coming from. Both of these movies should be produced by the guys who have co-invested in him. And neither one of the movies is going to go anywhere. But First Star is going to get some really good licenses. They do the computer adaptations of Superman. They released 2 Superman games over the years. Most famously, they also get the license to Spy vs. Spy and make the absolutely amazing Spy vs. Spy games for the 8-bit computers.
Now you've won my love back.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, the Superman games that they made were not that great, but Spy vs. Spy is just, they also do Boulder Dash. I guess that's important too. But Spy vs. Spy.
Spy vs. Spy. Come on, nothing.
That's such a great 2-player experience.
It really is.
Yeah.
All right. No argument here for that. Thank you, First Star, for not doing the movies. Or fortunately, the movies tanked, and you were forced to find a Mad Magazine license to go on.
There you go.
Electronic Arts gathers its rock stars.
A new type of computer game publisher has announced their plans. Electronic Arts. CEO Trip Hawkins has told the press that, quote, the people that create games are artists, end quote. And Electronic Arts will not bring those artists in-house, but provide each of them a producer who will make resources such as programming tools, graphic artists, etc. available so that they can let their creativity soar, and maybe even be able to go beyond their programming abilities to let their design talents really shine. Among those already signed up are star game makers Bill Raster Blaster Budge, John Temple of Apshai Freeman, and Danny Computer Quarterback Bunton.
as they would be known. That's what it would say on their virtual office doors. I'll tell you, 1983 me was drinking all the Trip Hopkins Kool-Aid. Hawkins Kool-Aid.
Oh, definitely. I mean, he had a vision. The idea of just how many additional resources were going to be needed for games in a relatively short period of time, I think, was what they didn't understand yet. The explosion of how many people you would need for a team on games within the next 5 to 6 years was not foreseeable. And the fact that he was so determined to go computer and not console is also going to bite him in the butt for a while.
Right. But, and most of these original EA titles are made as the old model of the single programmer, designer, developer, the rock star. That individual was, this is all Bill Budge. This is all Danny. This is all Freeman. That we don't... maybe that there was some support in terms of the sounds, the graphics a little bit, but otherwise it was still adhering to the one-person team. And that model wasn't going to hold up for a hell of a lot longer.
No. Yeah. And also the fact that... artists can be fickle. Artists aren't going to meet deadlines. Artists are going to, go off on tangents. And, I mean, Danny Bunton was over at SSI at this point.
Okay.
And gets lured away. And I talked to... I'm terrible with the names today. The founder of SSI. What's his name again? Super nice guy. I interviewed him a while ago. Okay. And he talked about how, Bunton got basically, lured away to EA. And it was a bitter pill because, there was just gold coming from Bunton. And, what do you do? Joel Billings.
Okay. Because I was going to say, I could literally hear Ethan screaming at us
exactly.
through the headphones here.
Yeah, and obviously he hadn't hired Bunton as a full-time employee. Bunton was also, just a person doing contract work. Yeah. And Billings was very laid back about it, actually. It was like, he offered her more money. But, it is one of those situations where Hawkins is coming in and he's going to be strong. He's going to be pretty ruthless with this talent acquisition. And
well, it is his time. It is his time to shine, as he predicted decades before. All right. Sharp shows off the X1.
At the Japan Data Show, a plethora of new microcomputers were shown, with a wide variety of chips and functionalities, but the most important for the future of computer gaming was probably the Sharp X1, a Z80-based machine that, in addition to being a color computer, included a TV tuner allowing for text and graphics to be superimposed on images directly within the system. The X1 series would get several revisions before spawning its successor, the X68000.
I always feel like we should pronounce it Z80, don't you feel?
No.
No? You think it's more of an American thing? You want to go with the Z80?
The Z80 itself, as far as I know, is an American chip. Now, the legacy, if you will, even though it shows up in a billion different machines, the big legacy for a lot of people is the ZX Spectrum. But the Z80 processor is never an English chip. Because it's just a clone of the Intel chip. So that's why. It's a Z80 processor, not a Z80.
All right. Despite my Canadian background, I'll give that one to you, I guess.
Yeah. So,
Sinclair Michael. I'm sorry, I was moving on.
Yeah, no problem. Go for it.
All right. Sinclair microdrive to be game changer.
With the competition in the home computer market heating up through price cuts by both Texas Instruments and Commodore and new machines launching constantly, Sinclair has announced that they will be bypassing regular floppy drives and instead launching the new micro floppy disk drive for the Spectrum and its American equivalent, the Timex Sinclair 2000, that will take about 4 seconds to load a program and hold up to 100K of data.
Oh, man. Unthinkable for us poor buggers with Commodore disk drives.
Yes.
Unfortunately, does it ever get released?
Oh, well, it does. They keep calling it the micro drive, but that's actually a misnomer. The press at this point doesn't know what it is, and they just know it's using magnetic media. The micro floppy is actually the micro drive, and it's a miniature tape mechanism that it essentially kind of functions like an 8-track tape.
Okay.
So it looks like this little cartridge with, or if you remember what old, dot matrix printers look like, the ink cartridges where they had the little tape at the top. That's basically what this thing is. They're unbelievably unreliable, unbelievably fickle. They're a pain in the ass, and in a year or two from now, when he launches the QL, which was supposed to be his business level machine, it's going to come with these things, and which means that you can never actually know for certain whether or not your work was saved or whether or not the tape was going to unspool on you or whatever. So, yeah.
Listen, cassette tapes were never truly the best medium. I can remember in cassette tape era that if it was important, save it twice.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is the problem. At least a cassette tape is an industrial level product.
Right. Yes.
These things are Sinclair level quality products.
Yes.
You look at it the wrong way, it falls apart.
Right. Did you know anyone who even owned a Sinclair 2000? I don't know that I've ever seen one.
I never met anybody with a 2000. Now, there were a bunch of people in Argentina that had ZX Spectrum clones.
Yeah. Sure.
But not the 2000 clones, because the problem with the 2000 is it's not compatible with the British ZX Spectrum.
Oh, okay.
They messed up enough of the innards that it was no longer compatible software-wise.
Oh, perfect. Thus,
yeah.
starving it of a reasonably rich import market that might have otherwise had it survive, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Had they been able to bring the software over,
maybe,
you would have at least had a shot.
Exactly.
But when you have to now create completely new software for this thing, forget about it. Game over.
Speaking of Spectrums, W.H. Smith slashes Spectrum's price.
The de facto source for Sinclair computers, news agent W.H. Smith, has announced that starting on April 26th, the 16K Spectrum, the base model, will go from £125 to just $99.95. This would make it the first color computer under £100 on the UK market. The 48K version will also drop from $175 to $129.95.
Oh, Sinky, you've done it again. You broke the £100 barrier.
Yes, he has. Now, granted, you do not want a 16K specky. That's going to be very, very limited in its usability. But and we have to also remember, the Spectrum at this point hasn't really been at retail in the UK for more than a few months. I mean, it started doing retail business in the new year. The 1982 launch was purely mail order.
Right.
And they didn't really have enough available to even to fulfill that. But, going into this, they're finally on the retail high street. They're dropping the prices, and this is largely also because the VIC-20 is selling for £130. And the Electron, which missed Christmas and still isn't out, is expected to cost $150. That's the BBC low-end machine.
It's the race to the bottom.
It's very much a race to the bottom, and the problem is that while the Speccy, in theory, has more colors, if you're just looking at individual screenshots, the Vic still looks a little bit more impressive.
Okay, interesting.
Depending on what you're doing.
Speccy had more colors than my Vic 20. All right.
Oh, yeah. Well, what the Speccy can do is it's got 3 shades of each of the colors. So it's got this ability to shift, but it's much more limited in the way that you have to divide the colors up. So just like you saw with Choplifter, that the little guys running around, they had basically a black border around them. So if they ran in front of an object, you saw the black border.
Right, right.
The Speccy has a 2-layer graphic system. And I'm oversimplifying slightly. So the top layer is 2 colors, but it's just, black, clear or black and one other color. And then what you would do is the screen is broken up, I think, into 8x8 pixel blocks in the background that can each only have 1 color in them.
Right.
So you end up with the famous Speccy color clash.
Right.
You're moving objects around on the front layer, and you're trying to match it up with the color in the back, but you would have to move the objects 8 pixels at a time in order to keep going with the pattern of colors.
Okay. Now my brain hurts.
Yeah, it's getting stuff to look good on a Speccy is an art form in and of itself.
That's why the Vic 20 looked better, because it had cyan. Right. Hey, speaking of the Vic 20, Vic 20 upgrade to 64 scrapped.
While Commodore had announced an upgrade for the VIC 20 to make it C64 compatible, this plan has been scrapped by Commodore, as, according to them, the markets for the two machines are very different, with the VIC 20 appealing to those learning about micros and the C64 appealing to small business owners.
I'm calling BS on this. Please, carry on.
Yeah, so this is part of a larger trend popping up in the news articles lately, namely upgrading existing machines. Those that bought a computer over the last year or two are realizing that newer models are far more powerful than what they have. Upgrading without losing compatibility is a very popular trend.
I'm surprised. This is the first I've learned of this. I'm almost shocked. Maybe I don't remember from 30, 40 years ago or whatever, but it's stupefying to me to think that you could somehow upgrade a VIC 20 to become a C64.
And this is the weird thing. Now, this is coming from a British magazine.
Right.
And I've got a feeling that this would not have been an issue for the less price-conscious North American market.
Right.
But it sounds like your typical Commodore telling you something in Europe just to get you to buy the machine thing.
Yeah, that's right. So that the secondary VIC 20 market, if they were worried about making the commitment price, I could see that. And especially since prices are starting to go down, there was that the wise consumer would be the wise consumer would wait instead of jumping in.
And this is one of those situations where, yeah, I mean, I can see how they probably promised that initially, to not devastate sales of the VIC 20 going into Christmas, because as we reported on last year, Commodore had such demand for the C64 in '82 in the United States and in Canada that very few machines actually made it to Europe. So the big loads of C64s in Europe are not showing up until now, this early 83 time period.
Right.
And
I would love to see a follow-up from the engineers in Commodore at that point when they heard about the idea that you could somehow plug a cartridge into the back of a VIC 20 and have that thing upgrade to what? I mean, the price alone for the amount of, you're dealing with a different processor, that significantly better sound chip, your graphic sub-processing. So it's mind-boggling to me how that could ever work with it as an expansion without literally replacing the motherboard of the computer, and the fact that the form factor. And again, because the form goes back to the idea of the form factor of the 64, exact same as the VIC-20, led to the problem of the disk drive, etc. Would be awesome to hear some reflections of engineers if that were ever even really pitched as something that could be realistically done. That's all. That would be really
Plus, you'd have to add a second joystick port too.
Yep.
Because that's missing on the VIC-20.
That's going to be one hell of a plug-in cartridge in the back of my VIC-20. Like, if such a thing were to have existed or been marketed back in the day, I promise you I would have sought it out. Because once I saw the 64 as an owner of the VIC-20, that was all I wanted. All I could do at that point was amortize the peripheral devices that we'd already purchased for the VIC-20 because I was in the loop and had to say, we're buying the more upgraded computer. Dear God, please hope it drops in price soon. All right.
Yeah. And now, one last note on this before we move on. At the same time, there's a new study from British survey company Gowling Marketing Services. And that finds that 5% of surveyed households own a microcomputer in the UK already, which is pretty impressive, 5%. And 1 in 7 of those homes already has bought 2 or more micros, showing a clear trend towards upgrading.
Yeah, there it is. That's me if I'm in the UK.
Yeah.
What do you mean? We bought you a computer 2 years ago. What's wrong with your computer? That. All right. PC compatibles in droves.
We've talked about this quite a bit in the last few months, but the number of machines that will run MS-DOS and purport to be IBM PC compatible has become overwhelming. How many of them will truly be 100% compatible? How many are undercutting the price of the original without being powerful enough to keep up? How many make the real thing look old? And why are so many of them portable? No one knows yet, but for those looking for PC compatibility on a budget, the options and perils seem endless.
Yep. Good.
Yeah.
Good luck. The IBM 100% compatible. How do you know? Well, I don't know. Put it in your computer and see if it runs.
Exactly. Well, there's just so many of them. I mean, I counted at least a dozen different machines talked about in different magazines this month.
Right.
And what's linked in the show notes for this are 2 articles, again, from British Personal Computer News, which is a weekly magazine, where they talked about a bunch of these machines. And as far as I know, Compact's the only one that's really cracked the code of true compatibility.
Right.
But there's...
it was the buzz line of the day, 100% compatible, and it was like practically a dangerous assumption to make in some ways, I suppose, in these early forms.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, you never truly knew if everything was going to run.
Nope.
And that's... just imagine you just invested. These machines are still not cheap. I mean, we're not talking the price of a Commodore 64. We're talking thousands of bucks for this machine in 1980s money. And if this thing suddenly doesn't run the one program that you need,
that's right,
you're screwed.
Yeah. IBM. I remember IBM certainly would enjoy that for as long as it lasted. Because, of course, they were what was always 100% compatible. And the price tag carried that. I mean, IBM also carried the idea of a fairly generous profit margin for themselves on their products and the quality of product. And
yeah.
Anyway.
And also they've already started the upgrade cycle because they've already announced the 286 machines are coming. And the XT is giving way to the AT. All of that is coming down the pipeline. They're establishing already this is a compatible line that will always get better. And the question is, at this point, will the clone manufacturers be able to upgrade? But,
I'm sure IBM is going to crush them and put them in their place and dominate forever. All right.
That's why I'm using an IBM machine right
Me too. We are using x86 architecture, though.
That's true. That's true.
John Scully assumes top job at Apple.
Lured away from selling sugar water at Pepsi, John Sculley has assumed the role of CEO at Apple. With his $1 million a year pay plus equally high signing bonus and several 100,000 Apple shares optioned, he has zeroed in on Apple's biggest competitor, IBM, calling them a formidable competitor and liking them to Coca-Cola. Yeah.
When is New Coke? When does that happen? That's later. I feel like that's not
later.
yet.
That's later. That's
okay.
Yeah. And New Coke is still a few years out.
All right, good enough.
Yeah.
What can we say about this? There's not much other than I guess it's a big contract for our little computer company that just was formed 6 or 7 years ago. Where is Steve Jobs at this point? Have they kicked him out by now, or
no? He's still in there. He's the one who brings Scully in because he's been pissing everybody off with. First, the Lisa failed. The Macintosh project is overdue, and he's been making headlines for the last year or so by cutting ties with any dealership that will not become an Apple exclusive.
Oh, okay, right. Yes.
And this is at the same time. I mean, Commodore is making headlines for being in every possible retail outlet. At the same time that Apple is limiting their outlets, and so I can't imagine that this doesn't play a role in the overall decision that they need professional management, because it feels like he's missing a beat, and they went with somebody who's coming from the ultimate consumer retail business. Pop.
Yep. Sody Pop.
Sody Pop.
Do you call it pop there? We call it pop, but the Americans call it soda.
No. The East Coast Americans call it soda. If you're west of the Mississippi, like I am, you call it pop.
Oh, it's pop there, right? And then there's the weird subsect of people in the South that call it Coke, regardless of what it actually is. Okay, that's right.
Yeah, that's basically around Atlanta, Georgia.
Right. I wonder why. Siemens shows off flat color display.
Siemens.
Yeah.
Siemens.
Sure.
Yes, at just 3 inches thick and consuming only 20 watts of power and light enough to hang on a wall, Siemens' new flat color display using electrified gases could be the future of both TV and computers.
I doubt it. Come on, that sounds too good to be true. It's not going to work. 3 inches thick, 20 watts of power.
I know, it's crazy.
Hang on a wall. Can't hang a TV on a wall.
Obviously, this is the beginning of what we know today as a screen. Now, interestingly enough, the original patents for the technology were filed in 1975, but it takes this long to finally have, a working model of it.
Yep.
And it's going to take a lot longer before it actually goes into full implementation. But hey, color display that's flat. I mean, that's something.
So why we go back 40 years? Because it takes 40 years for the product actually to productively develop or mature to the point where it becomes the mass product of today. The screen.
Exactly.
Although the telescreen. The telescreen in 1984 was kind of flat too, actually. But anyway, BBC to broadcast software over teletext.
The BBC has announced that it will be broadcasting 150K worth of software over the CFEX system, which will be readable by a BBC Micro with a teletext adapter. The teletext adapters run a whopping £225. The software on the service will be swapped out every 14 days. The telesoftware service would end in 1989.
That's just... So you don't have to type this in. I'm assuming this is...
No.
Okay.
So teletext for those... I don't know if you guys had any form of teletext in Canada. Did you guys have any form of teletext in Canada?
I'm thinking of telex.
No. Okay. So teletext was a thing that was very big in Europe. They tried in the United States several times. We talked about it already years ago on the show. It was this basically a text. Think of it as ASCII data with colors that was broadcast together with normal broadcast TV. So if you're watching, I don't know, Channel 4, you could switch over to the teletext for Channel 4, and they would have dozens and dozens of pages of text. Get weather updates or program guides or additional information or news or whatever. And you could just pull those up and just flip through the individual pages. They were even doing some choose-your-own-adventure style games where it's like, if you want to go left, go to page 450. If you want to go right, go to page 453 or something. And so you could also access this teletext service through an extra adapter on the computer.
Okay, there we go. I wasn't paying attention. The adapter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so now, granted, it's 225 pounds. I mean, we're still talking almost 3-to-1 to the dollar with the pound at this point.
Ooh.
This stuff is expensive. But yeah, it's $150K worth of software. Not too shabby. I mean, that's a lot more than a floppy disk is holding at this point.
Could there be an option for poor children such as myself to type this in so I don't have to purchase the 225-pound adapter in order to slurp the thing? Because I'll type it in. Don't give me the sweat equity's no problem.
No, probably not. But yeah, so it's an interesting idea. Now, this follows up on stories we've already covered about software being broadcast as audio over radio stations. So basically the audio that you'd record to a cassette and then play on the computer. There is another from UK Bristol Radio West, which is broadcasting a computer show called Datarama every Monday at 7:30 p.m., which is followed by a data burst after the station goes off the air at 1 a.m.
Seriously?
So, yeah.
They're going to blast the old cassette noises for the binary, and I'm going to record that over the air and then try and make it work on my machine.
Man. Yeah. But there's been radio stations doing this. I mean, we talked about this already 2 years ago.
Okay, sure.
There's been different attempts at this. Now, granted, you better have very, very good reception.
I was going to say you're one static burst away from ruin.
Oh, of course. I mean, it's probably more, just the awesomeness of trying to get it to work.
Oh, I would for sure. Yeah.
The success of it, but yeah.
I'd be up until 1, press record, get up the next day and wonder what in God's name was on the tape. You're right. Jeff Minter tops the U.S. charts.
Grid Runner, the fast-paced VIC-20 title by UK programming sensation Jeff Minter, has hit the top of the US charts. Over 15,000 copies have been sold, with over 8,000 of those in the last 2 months. The game is sold in the US on cartridge only, while a cassette version is available in the UK. Minter is already prepping a C64 version, as well as Attack of the Mutant Camels, Rocks, and the follow-up to Grid Runner, Matrix. He's only 20 years old.
Oh, yeah. Whiz kids. God love them.
Gotta love Jeff Minter. I mean, just as psychedelics and just pure adrenaline arcade action. Beautiful stuff.
It's true. I remember your games today, Jeff.
Yeah.
And Attack of the Mutant Camels was an awesome title. Frankly.
It was.
You really did need a better title back in the day because you weren't delivering too much on what you had for the VIC-20, but so long as it was, his heart was in the right place.
Well, basically, it was a clone of Empire Strikes Back on the VCS.
Yes.
Just with giant camels. But yeah, Grid Runner for the C64 was one of those games that I mentioned on that disc with 10 games on it. I played it.
Yeah.
But it was a re-release, and it was called Revenge of the Mutant Camel. So that game got several releases.
Okay.
But he also did a version a few years back for iOS, it's probably out on Android as well, where you can either play it with these really funky, modern, psychedelic colors similar to what he did with Tempest 2000,
right,
or you can just click a button and it will shift over to the old C64 graphics. Same exact game. So you can play, in the middle of play, you can switch between the graphic styles.
Ooh, okay.
And
That's
it
fun.
is awesome. Absolutely awesome. I don't know if it's still on the store, but if it is, highly recommend everybody check it out.
Ooh. All right, so where do we move? We're moving into social issues now.
We're
capping
now it's
off
more
with
the
a
miscellaneous video games in society.
the social video game. Video game sociology. Here's one near and dear to my heart: legal wrangling over a hitchhiker's game rights.
As the video game business has grown, so too has the scrutiny given to games based on other works. While games based on Star Trek or Tolkien were common in the amateur days of the 70s, licensors are beginning to see games as a major source of income, and a battle has now begun over a computer adaptation of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Douglas Adams' publisher had given Bob Chappell, I think I'm pronouncing that right, Chappell, a government employee who made an adventure game based off the book, permission to use characters and places from the books in a Commodore PET game he released in 1981, as long as he credited the author and books. Chappell then sold the rights to the game to Supersoft, which is now porting it to the C64, VIC-20, and Dragon to be published through Audiogenic in the UK. This is a problem for Columbia Pictures, which has optioned the movie and game rights.
Yeah. Well then.
Yeah.
I didn't know. So Bob Chappell presumably just kind of did his own little pet interactive fiction adventure game.
Bingo. Yeah.
And thought the name Zaphod was good, so he went and borrowed that. Got permission from the publisher. But then
he actually just called him up, and at this point the publisher didn't think much of it and just was like, don't try to pass it off as your own thing, but go for it.
Yeah, no, I mean, if it's 81, because in 81 Hitchhikers hasn't really blossomed fully yet, I don't think, as to what's going to happen to it.
81, it's either very, very beginning of 82 or in 81 is when the TV show comes out.
Okay,
so
right.
The TV show is already premiered. We talked about it on an episode a while ago. So the TV show has already come out, which is really going to push this into a whole different league.
Right, yeah.
Because that TV show is also going to get picked up for rebroadcast in the US, I believe, in 82.
And something's going to happen, because I don't believe it's Columbia Pictures that ultimately brings me the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy game on my computer.
No, that's Infocom, and again, I've spoken to an Infocom insider, and we actually talked about the how that game came about and what the relationship with Douglas Adams was like, and the fact that Infocom games were so well regarded, and and Douglas Adams himself wanted to work with Infocom, that he insisted that Infocom get those game rights.
That's right.
But yeah, so this is one of those things where it's probably, I'm guessing, Columbia has the game rights only in conjunction with the movie.
Yeah,
Similar to how, there were Tolkien games based on the books at the same time as the movies were coming out.
Right.
That had nothing. They couldn't use the imagery from the movies, but the movie games had to be based off the movies.
I kind of forgot the development hell of that movie. I forget exactly when it comes out, but I know that it's like, if it's 1983 and they're just starting to talk about the Hitchhiker's Guide movie that will eventually come out, we are years away from that movie actually hitting theaters. Yes.
The movie doesn't come out until 2005.
What? Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I remember it because I was living in Switzerland at the time, and I saw it in a tiny little movie theater in Switzerland with 2 or 3 rows of subtitles. It was a pain in the ass.
Oh wow! Oh, I would have totally slept. I was there like opening night. Doesn't matter. I was a decade off in my memory as to when that thing actually hit theaters. And Oh, amazing. I gotta go back and watch it.
It wasn't a good movie. I mean, it was pretty terrible.
We could do its own 2-hour podcast on where that thing goes off the rails and what's good and what's bad about it. It's one of those things.
It goes off the rails about 5 minutes in when it's not funny. I'm sorry, but
the minute Zaphod shows up on the screen is when that thing goes off the rails.
I didn't get a single laugh the entire movie.
I don't recall either. I recall this profound disappointment, but at the same time, I recall kind of almost being in awe as to, oh look, it's this beloved franchise that I've loved for so many years, and now we're finally going to get to see the movie. And I guess I went in with the unsettling knowledge of I'm going to be disappointed. So no matter how bad the execution was, I was there to forgive it. But again, I got to go. That's a movie I haven't seen probably since that time in the theater. Maybe once again on VHS, a second run. But I'll have to go back and re-experience the bad.
Trust me, you didn't see it on VHS. I was already past the VHS.
Or DVD, whatever. In
DVD, yeah.
Maybe downloadable form.
All I gotta say is you're probably going to get more enjoyment out of the Infocom game, which is notoriously hard and mind-numbing. So it's fantastic.
I highly recommend that if you hate yourself, please sit down. You can even play it online right now. Go play the Hitchhiker's game.
There's an online version with graphics now, so there you go.
Ew, no.
Yeah, the BBC released it on their website, and they added graphics to it.
Okay.
Still images, I mean.
Yeah, I know. I'm a text-only kind of guy. All right. Video games declared sexist, and they're right.
Yeah. Professor Sarah Kiesler, a psychologist at Carnegie Mellon University, has concluded through a study that the male dominance in arcades and video games' general emphasis on combat and sport themes alienate girls, preventing them from building the skills that will be necessary for jobs requiring computer familiarity. She said that the games are creating a, quote, new kind of male punk who prides himself on his talent at breaking codes, illegally copying computer games, and overloading time-sharing systems, end quote.
A little jab at the end there. You're not wrong, Professor Kessler, I guess.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this really is an interesting period from that standpoint because, I mean, I've known women who were coders in the 60s and 70s and early 80s on big mainframe machines, doing a lot of database coding and so forth. And it's around this time when, all the ads showing, computer usage, it's always the boy in the family who's got the computer in their room. And it very much feels like, this is a boy's activity, a guy's thing. But I guess they're selling it on the idea of these very competitive games that, for the most part, are not appealing to women. I mean, that's why we made such a big deal about Pac-Man appealing to women, because it was such an anomaly,
right,
in comparison with everything else that was out there.
Right. It must be frustrating to have been in that position. You're a prof at CMU. You've made this sort of public outcry, and then you'll continue your tenure in a decade later. Because, I mean, lady, if you think it's bad in 1983, wait till you get to the mid-90s. I mean, talk about not heeding your warning. Talk about basically shoving it back in your face and being like, well, what would help? I don't know. How about more misogyny?
Mortal Kombat, maybe?
Well, not even that.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the reflecting on what I remember seeing in modern times, and like 90s video games ads are absolutely notorious for jumping the shark on this sort of jejune behavior of, the boy who wants the violent video game. And, well, unfortunately, we sowed the seeds at this point here in 1980. The seeds had already been sown, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't pay a hell of a lot of attention to the people in the sociologists trying to help us. out of the problem.
Nobody will listen. Yeah.
No.
We were having too much fun blowing stuff up.
It was.
That was the problem.
I need this psychology professor, to tell me then why is it so fun when I destroy stuff on the computer? Why do I find that so satisfying? If it's that bad.
It's a clearly delineable form of success.
Yes. Why do I get so happy when the line flashes and disappears after I put it together in Tetris? Am I really just a dumb animal walking around getting my shots of endorphins from time to time? Is that what's going on here, Professor?
Yes,
it may be.
Yes. It quite clearly is. But, hey, a happy dumb animal is better than an unhappy dumb animal.
That's right. Keep it fed, keep it happy. All right. Well, I believe this brings us to the end. Is that? I see no more entries.
That is the end. Woo! We have no more entries. This was a long one.
Yes.
But, of course, everybody remember, follow us, blah, 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 blah. All the links in the show notes below. Support us on Patreon. There's one more task for the intrepid co-host.
Oh, my goodness.
You must choose a word of the episode.
It's the word of the episode. Why wasn't I prepared for this? Now I have to think in real time. The word of the episode is... Let's go with openness. Kind of lame, but there's a little bit of a theme there. Some of the locking out of third parties, being open, not just in markets and in knowledge sharing. Like
and also knowledge. More and more people having access to the machines.
It's true. Markets.
That's a big one. Openness. I mean,
maybe.
And
the other optional word I could have used was precipice, I suppose, which we're hanging at the edge of right now.
Openness, yeah.
So there, yeah, that'll be my theme for this show, I guess.
I dig it. Okay.
Very good.
Dale, where can people find your fine work?
Oh my goodness. At the ever-dying website known as twitter.com. I am 83. You can send me the Blue Sky invitation as soon as you get it, and I too will torment the poor bastard stuck on Twitter by saying, "Oh, I'm on Blue Sky." Mastodon, I'm not sure if that worked out as well, but I can also be found there under the same handle. But I recommend anyone, and fortunately the last couple times I've done the show, when I mention that, I only lose a couple more Twitter followers each time. So it's fine for me to mention it here. And I always recommend, if anybody wants to get into the community or find me and probably people smarter than me, Gaming Alexandria is a lovely place to begin. Particularly the Discord server, though I highly recommend the website and their preservation efforts.
I cannot agree with that more. I've been considering thinking about opening up a Discord channel for this show, and I'm not sure if there's enough interest to justify it. And so if anybody thinks that I should do that, please send me a message and let me know. Otherwise, I'll just keep piggybacking on Gaming Alexandria. So, with that being said, everybody, have fun. Hello, Ethan?
Okay, are we here? All right.
Did I lose Ethan? I've lost Ethan.
All right, yeah, it froze for me.
Now I can hear you again.
Okay, cut this out, Carl.
Okay,
actually cut it out. Don't say you're going to cut it out and then don't cut it out. Cut out this part. Okay, so what did you say after I said, atone for your sins?